Check, 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 check. Check, check, check.
Sitting in a chair and speaking into a microphone, recording.
Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check.
This is where all the magic happens for democracy. Okay. Burnsville Borough Council meeting. How close are we to our actual levels, Jim? Oh, okay. No, no big deal. I got 2 dead channels on the line. I know it's kind of troubleshooting. You know what? I might have you speaking to the light closest to you on the back there, but let me, I can over your wires. Okay, at this point we are streaming live on the test basis. Just so you all know, it's unlikely that anybody's watching.
Want to speak into that and see if you're getting anything? Speak into that mic and see if you're hearing anything.
Mic check, mic check.
It is on, right? It's flipped up?
Switches to where it may.
Yeah.
Switches the other way.
Okay.
Mic check, check, mic check, check, mic check.
try now.
Mic check from sitting position.
Oops, sorry, go ahead, try again.
Administrator's position. I am sitting for a mic check. Mic check. Ah, there we go. We got something going on. This is a mic check from the position of the Borough Administrator.
Okay, can you check the mic next to you?
This is the next chair at the Borough staff table. Giving a mic check from the staff table.
Okay,
Checking.
great, and the next one next to you?
Pick up.
And the one next to you?
Third mic at the Borough table. Speaking into the mic here at the table.
Okay, great, thank you.
Testing ambient sound pickup.
All right. I still got one problem on the other side.
All right. I think using just a camera for ambient sound in the middle is not going to cut. Just a phone.
You're not gonna get ambient sound?
I'm not getting enough to hear, so I think I'll move it back there, and if we could do the monitor. Think we can do the monitor?
Yeah, I think so, yeah, it's
Okay.
just a matter of getting the right cable going.
All right.
Should be all right.
I'm gonna run back to the borough just for, get I can get more blank paper.
Awesome, Anthony.
And, I'll make more copies of the agenda.
Cool.
Check 1, 2, check.
That's. First one was good, second one?
Check 1, 2, check.
Sounds good here.
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, check.
All right. Wireless mic check?
Oh, that's not on right now,
Okay.
but you can turn it on.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Wireless mic check. Checking streaming volume of ambient sound as recorded at the back of the auditorium.
A lot of echo, Jim, but not bad.
Yeah.
I don't know how much crowd noise we'll get. But check. Check, check, check. Check, 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 check. Podium mic. Check, check.
Well, the other problem with that is that when we project, that's why I kept it a little bit apart, because when we project, it says it's gonna be right behind it, so that's what I had talked about before.
here under the podium, red button. The,
We shouldn't need that.
yeah, that's,
If I start hitting that button, we got bigger problems.
that's what I figured. If my phone battery goes dead, the first thing I'll do is hit the button.
Here's for the monitor here,
Awesome, thank you.
and then,
At ease, I guess, I'm buying,
I think it's just more having a presence here than.
be reassuring. Hello, Victor.
Victor, I need you to get me into Fred's room. I gotta get a key.
Okay,
while I'm-
Tom, I'm sorry, we're going back on.
Fred Trumpy.
Oh,
But I gotta do something here first. Maybe in 10 minutes, can you come back and we'll walk down there?
I'm leaving for you on a lot. You take and I'm later a lot.
Okay, so I gotta get all the way to the back room. in
All right,
Fred's room. So
yeah.
he's got his room and he's got the back room and the back room.
All right.
Okay.
all right.
Thank you.
Wait, they got you.
So, Tom, you see what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, I do. I think we're gonna have to settle on this because it's already, I mean, you basically almost turned 180 degrees screen now.
Yep.
Over four,
Well,
it's gonna be more. I think we'll have to leave it like this.
all right.
It's easier to take.
I,
Are you gonna be here or should we set up?
no, I'll be around. I wonder if,
If it gets to the point where, you know, Jack or Ralph or
Right.
somebody's speaking at length, we can maybe move the camera. Not every single time they speak,
Yep.
but if they get to the point where they're,
okay,
you know, they have a long amount of information
Okay.
to cover, you know.
There you go. You see yourself now? That's you, right? Okay. Now, you got to help me out. Tell me when it's clear. Let me do this. Oh, shit. Let me do this.
Oh, that's not good.
I don't want to change horsemen in the middle of the apocalypse, but we don't have a screen. Could we drag this thing down front and project on a, no, there's no place else to project.
Hang on a second.
Doing better. One pen's fine. 12. Gotta get the swivel ones. That's like a $5 investment that doesn't make fun of me when I get mad with them in case
You still sending it from yours, right? There you go. Good now?
Yeah, I'm on the same stuff.
Okay. So now what I need to do is,
It's not quite focused.
yeah, that's like, I got to focus it. You got to help me focus it because I can't, I got old eyes. I can't see it.
Yeah.
So I can zoom it out a little more. That's about all I can zoom.
I think I think it's starting to go off the top as well, I think.
Tell me when you think it's focused.
No, I thought,
About there?
no, you just passed it.
Back a little bit?
Yeah, back. No,
Back the other way.
forward. Yeah, right about there.
Man,
Right about there?
I can't see
Okay.
anything.
Just go back and forth right where you are. See if we can get a little bit better.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me try to get this down just a hair.
Allison, could you do F5 and we'll see what it looks like when you're projecting?
Yeah, that's probably good.
Yeah, or start slideshow.
All right, all right, stay right there. Let me do a focus on it right now. Tell me when you think it's focused.
Go the other way.
Go, stop.
Right there?
All right, so I think that's the spot, but just keep going a little bit more now. No, it's getting worse.
Getting worse?
Chris, is this all Rubenetti stuff tonight, or is this the general meeting with everything?
The Ruben stuff, and then this is the affordable housing proposals.
Which
So this
all
I'm going back and forth, so you tell me.
come and pitch their
ideas? No, so it's a big deal. I thought it was like a special session just for Rubenetti.
It's here
Hang on a
because
second.
of Rubenetti.
Gotcha.
But these folks got bumped last time, so they're.
Right there? All right.
doing them first.
That is what it is.
Try to do
No,
it.
I believe
Yeah.
that
Just hit
we
2
were
or 3
expecting
slides and see
the,
if it.
the big part of the Rubenetti during the public comment section, I think. I don't know, Anthony's coming back with more.
Is there a way to open up the rest of the doors outside?
Well, the color is whatever's coming off your computer, but I can try and make it, since your slideshow's a little bit,
Thanks, guys.
see, I can do this. Make it a little bigger. Still looking focused to you?
Yeah, I mean, it looks a little out of focus, but this is as good as it's been, I think.
Well, let me see
Good
if,
evening.
There, back,
back a little bit.
back.
About there? About there? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Everything open for you.
Thank you, Victor.
You know where bathroom?
No, but show.
We don't have a bathroom.
Affordable housing presentations, I know we're the second one to go. So is the intent that we would bring the laptop up, connect it real quick?
I reckon
and
so.
go-
Yep,
go at
yep,
it?
yep.
Okay. And, so my boss is gonna be doing the speaking
Check,
at
check,
the
check, check.
podium presumably.
Yep.
Is there a way I can sit up front so that I can
Yes, so you
click
can take
through?
any
Are
of
those
those.
gonna be reserved for
Oh,
presenters
for-
or?
yes, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, those
okay, I didn't wanna steal anybody's seat.
Thanks for checking. But you could tell any of the other presenters who may go up.
Check, check, check.
Keep that for all the folks we are expecting to participate.
To keep the
Yeah.
cords,
Uh,
or,
yes, I guess we'll leave the,
so the laptop's ours, it's preloaded with
yes,
our
so
presentation.
you'll have to
Move it
take
on.
yours up,
Okay.
at the time.
Okay,
Okay?
that works, I'll keep it on me. Thank you,
Thank you
Chris,
very
thanks for all
much.
the coordination.
Oh, well, you bet. Anthony did the hard stuff.
No, you did all this stuff. This is amazing. Thank you for doing all this, Chris.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get away with it.
It's good. No, it's good. It's working out well. I have to post like agendas and stuff. and
Yep.
Ordinances, so I'm just gonna leave them here.
Great.
Check, 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 check.
Get a-
Check, check, check.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to get on the internet, it says it's searching for it. And it says join other network, of course I don't.
It's not likely that many people are watching,
2018.
but it's possible anything you
Check,
say
check.
or do will be captured and streamed.
Check, check.
This is big leagues now.
Check, check.
Depends on how you go. Hopefully it shows up. It's like best case scenario.
Mr. Maresca, you are online.
South, they're in, my buddy's a farmer living in Midway. It's on the Outer Banks, and they're only leaving the fire department and police officers. They evacuate the rest of the island. They're expecting over 36 inches of rain in 24 hours. Yeah. Plus a storm surge, and they're not sure what's going to be. If it's anything over 4 feet, their firehouse is underwater, so they're going to have to drive away from the flood water that comes in.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we think we have a dead. A little bit of drill today, everybody was crying.
They're mildly pixelated, but I think on whole, picture quality is still gonna be better.
How are you? How you doing, guys? Good, how are you? Good. Anywhere you want to sit? Yeah. All right. That's what I'm doing. Chill with us. Fortunately, we'll be in front. Well, no, we're not controversial. They put the net up for when people throw stuff, so the tomato should get caught. We're not controversial. We're the everybody's probably gonna leave after the controversial stuff. That pitch in on 2 or 3 people leaving tonight. I could send you some stories. I bet. Oh my god.
Thank you, Chris.
No, you bet.
I'm sure it worked out.
No, it's good. It looks like we're gonna be all right. We got a little bit more business to get the sound out there, but I think it's gonna be fine. That's your phone. Doing a heroic job. Yep. All right. No, that's perfect, Ralph. Thank you.
Not from our end, not the spectators.
Oh, you got it. I'm glad that you got it. Yeah. Good. You know something. That's good, good.
Just don't throw tomatoes too hard.
let's see, this is on, right?
Check. What do we got? It's live?
Your monitor's working.
Awesome, cool. You got it, you used the right one of those inputs, I guess, right?
Yeah.
In the back.
And I can give you more. Here's the output volume.
Awesome.
Low boost, you probably don't want that. You don't want high. So, I mean, you can adjust it to whatever how it sounds, but.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. I'm just gonna find something. I'll use a chair if I have to get it up there. Firing right into the phone. Oh yeah. It's all getting real now.
Well, it might be close enough now.
You reckon? Well, here, let me get the cans on and let's see what we.
Well, I can give you more here too.
This is an audio test. Meeting will be starting at 7 p.m. Anyone in the auditorium should be aware that while we are testing streaming, audio and video images may be picked up and sent out on our YouTube channel.
I can find. I got a stool I can boost up a little more. There's a stool underneath that. It's only gonna boost up about this much. That's the thing.
Let me see what I'm missing. If my phone got disconnected or what. But if we put it where. Yeah, let's get this stool. I can get the stool too. Let me just move.
Yeah, figure out.
Mic check.
Where's the microphone for this? Is it this side or this side?
I think it's by where the plug is. Assuming it's using the, the voice mic. But that's definitely all.
Yeah.
Precarious.
Try that.
Check. Check the mic check.
Much better.
Better.
Much better. Oh, it also picks up everything I say here.
Well, the other thing I can do. Oops.
Oh, we have to plug that in under here.
That's okay right here. Okay. I just wanted to be really, really ginger with this.
Oh, okay.
Because
Good
this
to know.
this connection here is a little dodgy. So I'm just gotta make sure that that stays on.
You're done.
I'm done. Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Winter. Let me see here. Give me let me go get something else. Might help. Might help.
So I think that's totally doable. Can't come up with anything else.
Maybe what we'll do is let's slide that whole thing over about maybe 6 inches or so. Give me a little space there. I can build a little.
Cool.
Do you see my keys?
Oh, nuts.
forgot to ask you, do you also want this audio recorded, or is it just that you're live streaming?
The live streaming should be good. I'm gonna use this pocket recorder for a fail-safe.
Okay, so it's like, 'cause I have something like that.
Oh, awesome, thank you. I'll
But-
do that.
You getting a physics lesson?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
Oh, yeah. You on the lights today? Hey, Steve.
What's up? How are you? Good, good.
Good to see you.
Oh, man, beautiful. Was this a woodshop final project one
Yeah,
year?
actually, I think it was. Because somehow or another, I ended up with like 3 of them.
You've got Eugenia's College. You use this one?
Yeah, I do.
Do you know Eugenia?
I do.
Get out of here. When did you work with her?
We work with her all the time, actually. With
Oh,
the,
man, that's awesome.
Yeah. All right. That's about as good as it's going to get there, I think. Did you want to plug this in again, or you got it plugged in over here?
I plugged it in over here. Yep.
So you're all plugged in,
Yep.
and you got that plugged in where? Underneath there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Don't forget this. That's yours.
Thank you. I did 6 years college physics after graduating from Eugenia's program.
Oh, did you?
In 05.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
Yep.
Oh, wow. So you're
I miss it all the time. I'm in touch with her all the time, and the rest of the graduates.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Man,
yep.
interesting. Yeah.
I left.
Do you know Mark Shaquille?
No, I'm afraid not.
Mark went through her program like right around the same time he did. I think he graduated in 06, maybe.
Then he probably took my technology class. I taught the technology for physics teachers class until like 14 or something.
Interesting. He teaches here.
Oh, how
Mark
about
does,
that?
Yeah, he started the year after me. I started here in 05. And he started in 06.
Wait a minute. Wait,
Mark
that Mark.
Shakir, Polish guy.
The Polish guy. Oh,
Polish
right.
guy, yeah,
I
he's-
forgot his last name.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we were tight. I assumed he wasn't working here anymore because I hadn't heard from him
No,
for
yeah,
so long.
yeah. He's
That's
a
right.
character. He's
Yeah, oh,
he's
yes,
a
he is.
character.
I remember
yeah,
him well.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun.
I remember him well. I'm glad to hear. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, no, he's doing great.
Huh, oh, neato. That's a great gig. That's very interesting to see. Jim, that's cool. I moved to Bernardsville in 06, like a week before my son was born and a week before I started my first teaching job.
Oh, okay.
So the first 6 years of my time in Bernardsville were a blur of being a new parent and a new teacher. So it all went by very quickly.
I started in 2000. I'm teaching calculus.
I heard it.
So I was working in the real world, so to speak, for 8 years, and then I had other shut down the division that I was running. We all got set back, and I started selling in the area just for something I did. That was a marketing role. I was giving presentations. I should teach. So I taught at Pacific from 2 to 5. And then they gave me tenure, but I decided because this position down here opened up and I live in town. So
Right.
So I've been here since 05.
That's funny. My career change was 9/11 related. I was about to take a job in Basel with Novartis. I was in IT and pharma. But like a week before 9/11, I was offered a job locally and I met this girl. So that started a chain of events that led to going to grad school, becoming a teacher, settling down here. That's good stuff.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, you know.
I'll tell Marcus.
Well, please do. I feel bad that I lost touch with him.
Yeah, when I know where he is.
But
He lives in the
when you lose touch with a teacher, you know why. It's because he's working his ass off. But in my 6 years here, I met nobody. I learned nothing about the town. Because I was being a new dad and being a new teacher. It was crisis, solid crisis.
Quick logistics question.
Yep.
The mic down front. When it comes time for the presentation, do we turn it on for them? Physically turn it on? Or
I guess we'll be ready to go down and turn it on.
I don't know who's speaking. I can just show them. Well, I can mute it up. I don't want to leave it on the whole time. It's wireless.
Oh, that
You only get 2 or 3 hours out of it.
okay. So yeah. So let's.
So I don't know
Let
who's
one of us
doing the
do.
presenting.
That's a good point.
Parker? Did you let him know that you want to go ahead with it? It's on my radar now. I just don't want to call him in like late September and he'd be like, oh, well, now we can't get to it until December. It's on my radar.
Let's call Kylie and make sure.
Swiss cheese brain, remember.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, my Swiss cheese brain would never remember that.
All right, we'll see you later.
What's the VA, 75 or 1? Shots fired. He didn't even start yet. Start yet? One. Yeah, Kevin, I just go out real quick. Hopefully. Just gonna be showing up. Yeah, flight people. Shouldn't be too bad. Yeah, exactly. All good. How you feeling? That's good. Yes, ma'am. Anywhere you want to sit.
So you're fine doing it. So if I want these down a little bit. Put those up a little bit. Is this going to kick off exactly 7 o'clock?
They're usually pretty good about it.
Okay, I just got to, my classroom is 30 feet away, I just got to pour my coffee, so.
Oh, cool.
Set up?
Yeah, looks like we might get away with it.
How are you? Good.
know these guys are over here. I don't know what the three over there. I'd like to go check and just double check that the switch is towards them. Good thinking.
Notice of this meeting was provided to the Borough News, Courier News, and Star Ledger filed with the municipal clerk and posted on municipal bulletin board on December 12, 2017, and amended on August 20th, and amended on August 27th to change the location to Performing Arts Center at Burners High School, 25 Walcott Avenue. Please all rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, at this point in the meeting, we're going to move to item number 4, an ordinance. I'm going to open a public hearing on ordinance 18-1779, an ordinance concerning a use permitted in the industrial district and amending chapter 12 of the Borough Land Development Code entitled zoning. Meeting is open. Jack, would you like to give a brief explanation on this?
Yep.
Mr. Sullivan's going to recuse himself. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to note at the outset that the affected property owners have filed a protest pursuant to the municipal land use law. What that means is that it will take 4 affirmative votes to adopt this ordinance, regardless of the number of people voting. So it's 2/3 of the full membership of the council.
Okay. All right, anybody from the public wishing to be heard? Yes, sir, come up and please state your name for the record. Thank you, yes, Mr. Parenti, yes, thank you. He's going to bring up a mic for you right now.
Wait 1 second, they're going to bring a mic for you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor,
Good evening,
council
sir.
members. My name is Joseph Ferranti. I represent a company called Old Quarry Road Associates. They are a landowner in the Burnetsville Quarry, and they are the proponent of the 100-ton per day materials recovery transfer station facility that is currently in application before the New Jersey DEP. What I would like to do tonight is briefly describe our response to this ordinance, this proposed ordinance, and the reasons for it. I believe you each have received a copy of a letter that I sent to you this afternoon. I'm not sure whether you've had a chance to read it.
Yes.
I do have a copies here, which I would like to enter into the record. Mr. Pigeon?
Yes, sure.
Do I hand it to you, or clerk? With me tonight also is Mr. George Casino, who is the project engineer and who can speak in some depth about the nature of the project and why we believe it's not only justified but appropriate for this site. We began this effort to build this project in 2015 when the council, in its wisdom, adopted an ordinance which, in my experience, and I've been in this field for many years, many decades I might add, is almost unique in the state, where a town, enlightened in an enlightened way, looked at its resources, looked at the responsibilities that have been thrust on the town by the state to promote recycling, and found that the land use laws of the state did promote and, in fact, purposefully promote recycling. My clients have been servicing the town for many years. and they felt it was time for them to move to the next level and offer an enhanced approach to recycling by building a facility in the confines of the quarry, well buffered from all residential uses, as most of you know. We felt it was an appropriate site. Then recently, we have been confronted with this proposed ordinance that basically guts what the 2015 council did and turns back the clock. I have to say, as on a personal note, I've witnessed many towns go through this kind of dance, let's say, where they, in the guise of perhaps a higher order or many other rationales, confront something that they feel is inimical to their way of life. And we see this sadly being done in Bernardsville too. From my own standpoint, personally, seeing this happen here is a sad event. We went to the county, we went to the state and said, we're dealing with a very enlightened community here. We think we can build a good plant here, we can run it well, we can benefit the town. There'll be revenues that we can share with the town. All of those things we thought we touted, and all of a sudden this comes about. And then we read the reasoning. The reasoning is you have a fair housing plan, and you have decided to put a good hunk of your low-income housing in this quarry. To be precise, 51 units in this quarry. I have done some research, not exhaustive by any means, but I've looked at every reported case in the New Jersey courts that have dealt with overlay zones with a durational provision in it, as this one is, and I've seen none that have ever tried to put an overlay zone in an industrial zone. They've put them in residential zones, open space, mixed-use zones, commercial and residential. Overlay zones are appropriate there for low-income housing. Never have we seen it, have I seen it, in an industrial zone. And there's good reasons for that. They're just incompatible. Residential uses, particularly intense residential uses in an industrial zone, such as we have here in the quarry, strikes me as highly inappropriate. In closing, and as I attach to my letter to you, the state of New Jersey has clearly gone on record that situations that promote the proximity of low-income houses with industrial, difficult environments are not to be easily sanctioned. State agencies have to look carefully at that. The history of this state of having low-income dwellers, low-income residents confronted by potentially dangerous environments is something we want to get away from. And it seems to me what you're doing here is going in the opposite direction. We believe what we have is a very sound proposal. It's been already reviewed by the county SWAC. They approved it. They approved the site. The state of New Jersey looked at the minutes of the county SWAC meeting, looked at the decision that the freeholders did, and they certified it. The DEP commissioner certified the site. And based on that, we've moved forward. We retained engineering experts, traffic experts, noise experts. All of those people have submitted reports that have been incorporated into our application before the state. This is an exhaustive process. It's well monitored, well regulated. And we would ask that you reconsider this proposed ordinance on that basis. You don't need to do anything in this zone. The overlay will not probably ever come to fruition because you don't have the infrastructure to support that. And that's what the state law says. If you do overlay zones, particularly those that are durationally provided, waiting for the right infrastructure, in this case sewer and water to attend that facility, you're not required to do anything. And the overlay zone does not mean that you have to change the underlying uses. My colleague, George Crimmins, and his partner Rob Simon also gave you a letter, and he goes into that rationale in much greater depth than I am here doing for you now. But we would urge that you seriously reconsider this ordinance and actually reject it. I'd like to introduce George Casino, our engineer, who can go into some more detail about the project. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members.
Before we go into more detail, can I ask some questions?
Sure.
Thank you. So you said that the ordinance of 2015 was unique. That was the term you used, unique. Does that mean it's unusual?
2015?
The 2015 ordinance that originally changed
Yes.
the...
In my
you said it was
experience-
unique in your experience. Does that
yes.
mean it's unusual?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
All right. You also gave...
Happily so, I might say.
Pardon me?
Happily, for Bernardsville's sake.
You also characterized 51 units of, you call it low-income housing, 51 units of affordable housing are part of the overlay, which is actually 340 units of mixed-income housing. So there'd be a much larger proportion, only 15% of it would be for affordable housing, and the rest would be market-rate housing. So I think the characterization that it's for low income is a mischaracterization. It's for mixed-income housing, and that's what the overlay is actually for.
I appreciate that. I think that's
Clarify
accurate.
that point. You also mentioned that no other, in your experience, in your decades of experience, no other location has talked about using an industrial site.
No, I said no other reported case that I've been able to find, and I haven't done an exhaustive research, but I've done enough to see.
I've noticed in the newspaper, locally, Berners Township, our adjacent community, is looking at mixed-income housing for their former quarry location as well.
Well,
would you say that that's pretty similar to this?
I haven't seen their quarry, but maybe you're starting a trend.
Okay. Actually, I think they predated us in their proposal. Okay, and then you also talked about an exhaustive process that you've been through. Is that correct?
Well,
You did mention that.
it's a term I could use. It's a fairly detailed process, yes.
Okay. So I've been provided with the EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, waste transfer stations, a manual for decision making. And on page 12 of that, I have this, Anthony, to be entered into the record as well. So here's a couple things that they talk about as recommendations for a waste transfer facility. And page 12 specifically addresses informing the community. It says, when initiating a siting process, education must be extended beyond the sitting committee and include a community-wide outreach initiative. Components of this type of public outreach typically include special public meetings, interviews with local newspaper and feature stories, interviews with media and editorial boards, interviews with broadcast media, news conferences, press releases, and press kits, paid advertising, internet sites, informational literature, direct mail with project updates, city and council commission presentations, presentations to civic, environmental, religious, and professional groups, presentations to neighborhoods groups, community education programs and workshops, reading files located in public libraries or community centers that document the process. So beyond community-wide outreach, initiate specific and targeted contact with key members of potential host communities and identify community-specific conditions that need to be considered. Individuals might become proponents of the proposed facility if contacted directly for input, rather than opposing it based on misleading or secondhand information. I would say based on that recommendation directly from the EPA, specifically for waste transfer stations and a manual for decision making, would you say that your process was thorough?
Well, that's looking at it from a different vantage point. What we have done thus far is we have gone through the hearing process. Here, there were public hearings on the zone, on your zone. Our involvement there was rather minimal. At the county level, we had public hearings. They were advertised. We made presentations before the county SWAC, which is a representative body, including all municipalities within Somerset County. There are representatives of each borough, each municipality within the county.
What's that acronym, the county what?
SWAC, it's called the Solid Waste Advisory Council.
Thank you.
SWAC. And we made a few presentations before them. They were publicly noticed. I think what you're alluding to may happen at the next stage, which is when the application is reviewed by the state, by the New Jersey DEP. There will be public hearings then. There will be an opportunity for the public, the affected public, to make presentations. There will be an ample opportunity for the public then to raise concerns, to evaluate the application, to ask questions, to raise issues before the state. And at that point, if it's necessary, if the state decides it's appropriate, some of those or some or all of those steps that you just described could be taken. I can't say that, that there would be advertising like promotional literature. That strikes me as a bit excessive, but I think there'll certainly be ample opportunity for the public to become involved and to make the public sentiments heard and understood. That is an exhaustive process. It can take years in some big cases. This is a 100-ton facility. This is what is called a small-scale facility. When you're talking about maybe a 500,000, couple of 1,000-ton facility transfer station, those have major environmental impacts. In those cases, you'd go nowhere without that kind of process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? All right.
I'd like to introduce
Gentleman,
George
the engineer,
Messina
yes.
then.
And just some ground rules as we go on. We ask each speaker to limit their comments to 5 minutes so everyone here can be heard this evening in a timely fashion. So, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr.
I recommend we use our timekeeping device. That's
Okay.
all.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public.
If you could just state your name for the record for the clerk. Thank you.
My name is George Casino, C-A-S-C-I-N-O. I'm a consulting engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey, and I've represented Quarry Management Associates for several years. Learning of the 5-minute gavel,
yeah.
I will try to be as quickly as I can to present 2 or 3 pages of what I believe is information that the council and certainly the public should be aware of if they're not already. I was retained in 2015 by Old Quarry Road Associates to help them in the design of a small-scale resource recovery facility. As you all know, the property is located in the I Industrial District, which was which was modified by Ordinance 1699 to permit a small-scale facility such as we're proposing. So what we're proposing is in today compliance with your current zoning regulations. After I was retained, I was told to put together a site plan that could show a facility of 100 tons per day. I did. On May 16, 2016, we submitted an application to the Somerset County Board of Freeholders to start the process of getting county inclusion within the solid waste management plan. As Mr. Ferranti said, prior to freeholders' approval, we had to appear at a couple of public hearings of SWAC. The freeholders acted on it. And finally, on May 9th, 2017, the freeholders approved their plan to include our facility within it. On September 1st, 2017, Commissioner Bob Martin of the DEP also approved the location of the facility within the quarry management area. Therefore, on April 13, 2018, we filed an application with the DEP for an operating permit. That's the process we're in. They judged the application complete, and one of the things they did was to send copies to Bernardsville. And as I'm sure the board is aware, copies were sent to the town, hard copies. They asked for CDs. We forwarded that over to Mr. Soriano. I'd like to just quickly clear up a couple of misconceptions about the facility. On a bullet point, the facility is proposed to be located in an existing heavy industrialized area. The facility's owners have been operating at the site as local businessmen for 17 years. Existing truck operations on the site will be terminated upon construction of the facility and be relocated elsewhere. The facility is for materials recovery from non-hazardous hazardous construction and demolition materials and bulky materials. There's no household waste, there's no commercial waste that's putrescible, that means decomposable in any manner. Its maximum capacity is 100 tons a day. 80% of the incoming materials are expected to be recycled and entered back into the marketplace. All processing will take place completely inside a new building of approximately 8,000 square feet. Again, only construction materials and bulky materials from homes and businesses will be accepted. Consequently, no odors will be generated by the processing of C&D and bulky materials which are non-processable. Sound emissions, which will be inside the building, will meet daytime and nighttime New Jersey criteria. And the residential area up on a hill will basically experience inaudible sounds from the facility. What I'm telling you, by the way, is all part of environmental impact statement, which the town now has a copy of and can review it at its leisure with any professionals they'd like to look at. Special hours on Saturday mornings will be provided for residents' convenience to dispose of their bulky waste items. Normal materials acceptance hours are set for Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Overall daily truck traffic is estimated to be between 5 and 6 trips per roadway streak hour. A lot has been said about truck traffic. The biggest truck traffic from our facility will be transfer trailers. Approximately 2 trips per day of transfer trailers will result. We've recommended to the county that those transfer trailers be directed south from Old Quarry Road to utilize 202, 206, and Interstate 287 and avoid the downtown area of Bernardsville. Revenue received from the tipping fees from the users of the facility will be shared with the borough, assuming the facility is approved in a negotiated settlement with the town.
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay, the only other points I want to make had to do with the actual overlay zone. There's 29 acres of developable sites that's been identified. That affects 13 individual property owners on 23 separate parcels. We are one of them. What I'm suggesting is we're the only facility within the overlay zone that will operate indoors under strict environmental control. So we see no reason why, even if you go forward with the overlay zone, that you should pick on us specifically and take us out and be the only permitted use taken out of your zone. There's other heavy industrial uses allowed, asphalt plants, car storage, trucking operations, concrete, landscapers. You're leaving them in, but you're taking us out. When we think we can be just as compatible with any affordable housing in the future. I'd like to, if I could, since I'm short on time, can I give a hand in to the board?
Yes, you can, sir. Thank you.
Testimony.
Council members, any questions?
Yeah, one of the concerns, I think, is the transfer trailers, say, with the heavy trucks that be going in and out in a couple of days. With the tipping trucks coming in, how many tipping trucks do you anticipate in a day coming in?
Well, if we're talking about normal solid waste vehicles like garbage trucks or containers, there'll be approximately 25.
I think that's one of the concerns, it's one of mine too, because getting through those lights, I mean, they're becoming from all over, not just the south. So one of the concerns is, getting down Mount Airy Road through the lights on 202, the additional truck traffic would really make, a bad situation probably worse. So, I mean, how many trucks are out there right now? I know you park trucks back there.
You mean how many trucks are in the current operation now? Well, I don't know the exact number. You can ask Mr. Luciano, but I would estimate that there's a dozen at least.
Okay, so
those trips are going in and out today, and they'll be terminated with the construction of this facility.
So in a sense, conservative estimate, we're effectively doubling the truck traffic from the quarry? With the tipping trucks coming in?
That might be reasonable, but I can't confirm that. If you want to ask that question directly of Mr. Luciano,
Can I ask you a question, though? You said that the current truck traffic would be terminated.
Yes.
Is that in writing in your application for this permit? I've read the entire
No,
application, and I didn't see that anywhere. There were any
goes
termination
without-
of existing traffic.
It would absolutely go without saying. We are demolishing.
It doesn't go without saying, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm saying it now, under oath. Yes, the application shows that the site would be vacated and replaced with our facility. So therefore, there could be no continuing operation of the existing trucks the way they are today.
I remember seeing 33, not 25.
It's 33. The traffic study in the application says 33 trucks.
That's what
I
I
think
read.
what's confusing for some people is you're talking about some trucks differently, in a different category. You're saying 2 transit trucks a day. Those are the ones that we're removing the refuse. That's not the recyclable materials. 2 of those. Is that right?
That is correct. There's 2 transfer
But
trucks
then
per
there's,
day.
the rest of the application says there's 31 other trucks, in addition to those 2, for a total of 33 trucks. That's your traffic study.
Now, our traffic study shows 25 trucks coming in and 25 trucks going out per day, plus additional recycling containers. The total of about 60. Of those 60, 2 are transfer trailers that we've suggested that go south. There's existing truck traffic at the site today, which will be terminated.
Are you aware that the county has recommended that those 2 transfer trailers that you're recommending go south, go north through our town?
Yes, we've taken issue. They've recommended that those trucks go through Bernardsville, and we've taken issue with them and suggested that it is not safe for those trucks to go through Bernardsville and that they should be directed south to 287.
Are you aware that Far Hills does not want the trucks going through their town?
Nobody wants
Or
to
Bedminster, thank you.
I'm not aware of that, but I'm not surprised. But again, that wouldn't change our recommendation that we believe the safest place to take those 2 trips per day is south 202, 206 to I-287. That's the safest route for those 2 trucks a day.
It's inconsistent with the county's recommendation.
That is inconsistent with the county recommendation, which says we should send them north through downtown Bernardsville.
Okay. The other trucks, there is no recommendation for the other trucks. They're going to come and go as they see fit.
That's correct.
Okay. You said that the application is consistent with the ordinance. Did you say that?
The use proposed on the site is consistent with the existing ordinance.
Okay. The existing ordinance, 151699, mentions concrete, trees, soil. I think there was one other thing, tree stumps or something. Existing ordinance says concrete, trees, soil, and I think it's tree stumps. This is the ordinance that we're looking at changing as of today.
The existing ordinance limited to construction, demolition, and bulky solid waste.
All right, while our attorney's looking up what the exact wording is.
Yeah.
I believe it was concrete, trees, tree stumps, and soil. That's what the 151699 refers to. The application is for type 13 and type 13C materials, construction debris, correct?
No, the existing 2015 ordinance said materials to be recovered and recycled are limited to construction, demolition, and bulky solid waste.
Construction done, didn't they list the items?
Not in that section that's being
But 13 and
proposed to be
13C.
repealed by this ordinance.
So 13 and 13C includes appliances, full junk automobiles, as well as automobile parts. Your permit is inconsistent with what this is saying. Cars are not construction debris. Appliances could be considered construction debris, maybe. But automotive parts and cars, these are part of your application for a permit to the DEP.
That's not true, sir. Okay, first of all, the existing code allows a material recovery facility, which allows construction, demolition, and bulky solid waste. That's exactly what we have described in our environmental impact statement and in our operations manual. I think the confusion is that the DEP doesn't break down those categories that way. They list type 13 and type 13C, which includes other materials. We have not asked for that. All of the descriptions and all of our documents talk about construction and demolition waste and bulky materials, which just happen to be part of 13 and part 13C.
Okay,
We can
so-
stay on the record now, we have no intentions to take any cars at this facility
I think
whatsoever.
what Mr. O'Day is concerned about, as we all are, is like, if there's a change in control down the line, you're permitted to do that. Somebody else could very well come in and not honor that arrangement.
Not without changing their permit. The permit is very specific. We're asking only for construction and demolition debris and bulky materials. We're not asking for cars. If we have to
No,
further
the
clarify
permit
that.
application says 13 and 13C. It doesn't say construction debris.
No, the application form checks a box that DEP asked you to check. The documents 2 inches thick describe what that means. The documents describe construction and demolition debris and bulky materials only, part of those. We're happy to stipulate that we have no intentions in our application to do anything else. We'll stipulate that at the public hearing that the DEP will hold. We'll send in a separate letter if you'd like us to do, beyond what we're saying here tonight. No intentions to take anything other than what we've said in the application document.
So that means you would be, in essence, in violation if one day someone was back there and saw 3 vehicles being brought in. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
Let's fast forward and say you were already operating this facility.
Yes.
We've all heard, and you've been saying and being consistent, saying it's only going to be that type of material. Whereas 13 or 13C, I'm not sure which one, allows for these automotive parts or whole
13.
cars.
13.
Okay. Let's say we go back there and when someone saw cars in there, are you now, or is the facility now in violation?
No, they would clearly be in violation of the DEP permit if they accepted whole cars into the facility, clearly.
I think we need to look into that, Jack.
Yeah, I think we need to see
I mean,
that.
I understand what the applicant is suggesting, but I'm not sure that's the way I would read it, but we need to look into it. You mentioned that household waste in any manner would not be processed. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, I think we need to clarify for the public that within your application, you've acknowledged that up to 20%, and the DEP's assessment is it might be more than 20% of the materials that come in dumpsters may not be the type of material you're looking to recycle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so within that 20% could be other non-type 13 or type 13C materials. Household waste, for example, could be delivered to you. Now, I understand you're not going to process it, and you're going to exit that material same day, but that material will still be processed 20 tons a day, up to 20 tons a day by your assessment, perhaps more by the DEP's assessment, would be processed through the plant and exited within the, let's say, 12-hour, or your guys are asking for 16 hours of operation a day, 7 days a week. So 20 tons of non-type 13 or 13C material, which could include household waste, will be processed based on your application that you're permitting.
Can I answer?
Yeah.
Okay. 20% of the incoming materials, which can only be 13 to 13C, we do not believe will be recyclable. Of that portion that is not recyclable, I can't tell you that someone cleaning out a house is not going to throw a banana peel into it. If a banana peel happens to be mixed in with the construction and demolition material or with the sofa, that is not considered recyclable, and that would be part that goes out to a residue site. But that would be a de minimis amount. Please don't confuse the 20% of C&D and bulky that's not recyclable with the de minimis amount of somebody throwing out a banana peel or something like that.
Do you have any control of what somebody at a construction site puts into a dumpster?
No, we have control at the scale house when they get there and when they go to tip their load. And if someone's load doesn't meet our criteria, they'll be turned away.
So you'll look in the dumpster before you let them tip it? Is that...
We will ask where it comes from, what's in the material, take a quick scan, then they go in and they tip their waste. Now we're going to find out the truth. If it isn't as they say it is, we stop them and say, hold it, this isn't what you said it was, get your material and take it out.
So I understand what you're saying. Is that part of your application? Because when I read the application, I didn't hear what you just characterized as an inspection system or a way of rejecting material on an incoming basis. I didn't see that in the application.
I think if you check the operations and maintenance manual carefully, you will see there is a provision for scale control of the incoming material in the operations and maintenance manual.
Was the operations and manual provided as part of the application?
Yes, it was.
It was one of the electronic copies that you sent us?
Yes, it was.
How often is it audited or inspected by the Department of Sanitation or whoever have oversight of that?
The oversight of it is by, well, the town can come and inspect anytime they want, but the state has a general rule of thumb that they don't come any less than once a month. But a new facility will probably come more often, just to make sure it's operating right, but after it's operating, they come at least once a month. That doesn't count the county inspectors or local inspectors, that's the DEP.
You're saying the DEP comes at least once a month?
Yes, that's their rule.
When I spoke to the DEP, they said that they would target coming once a month to all the locations that they're responsible for. They have a total of 7 DEP inspectors for all of northern New Jersey. The other inspectors are tasked with southern New Jersey. And the DEP gentleman whose name is on the application, I think it's Richard Campbell, is that right?
Yeah.
Richard Campbell said that that is a goal, not a guarantee. So I think you're mischaracterizing it compared to what I was told by the DEP themselves, that it's a minimum of 1 inspection a month. They said their goal is to inspect once a month. They hope to do that.
I don't want to quibble about their language, I'll take what you say as faith, but the DEP also has arrangements with counties, I know this as a fact, where they sign an agreement with the local county health department, who has more time on their hands, and they make those inspections much more routinely than the state does. And again, there's nothing to keep the town or the county health department from inspecting that anytime they want. They can't be denied access.
Anybody else got any further? 2 more questions here. Okay, I heard I made a note during your testimony, you said something about operations Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In the application talks about running 7 days a week, not 6 days a week. And they also say 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for processing of incoming material, and additional 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. for doing additional processing of the material after that. So effectively running 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. That seems inconsistent with what you just said.
I think I said that they would come in 6 a.m. Waste would be accepted between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. You are correct that after the waste acceptance hours end, between 6 and 10 at night, they might do further processing, maintenance, repair on their equipment. Your point about Sundays is very well taken, and we're prepared to say tonight that the Sunday operations we propose, if we weren't clear, we'll make it clear, is only in the cases of emergencies, upon request perhaps by the town as a result of a hurricane or a cleanup. So we're willing to stipulate that any Sunday operations are emergency only.
Can you explain why you picked such broad hours of operation? There's a waste transfer facility, I think it's in Parsippany, if I remember correctly. It operates, it's only open 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I think 4 hours on Saturday. Can you explain why your operation needs to be so extensive for so many hours, for so many days?
Well, first of all, I can't explain why other people did what they did.
No, I'm just using it as a comparator for somebody who processes many, many more tons of material in less time than what you're asking.
What scale is the one in Parsippany? How many?
It's like 1,500 tons a day.
1,500.
It's a large facility. It's above. I don't remember it right off the top of my head.
Yet this is 100, and we're hearing it's more.
Yeah, I actually, as part of my comments the last time we were together on August 21st, I had it written down in front of me, but it's a larger facility, not a 100-ton limit. And it operates, I think it was 7 hours a day.
Where is it, Parsippany?
Yes, I can answer that. We estimate that about 3 trucks per day would arrive in an hour. That's 1 every 20 minutes. We think 1 for every 20 minutes is enough time for a truck to come in, get weighed, tip his load, weigh on the way out. 20 minutes give adequate, safe time for that. I can't speak for anybody else.
Anything else? council members? Chris?
I have nothing else.
Okay. Everybody satisfied?
Yeah, I got one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
You did a noise study, correct?
A noise expert did the study.
Sorry, it's part of the application is included, there's a noise study. That
Yes.
was the point. Okay. What were the conditions that were actually measured?
There were 5 separate sites that were analyzed, one of the sites being up in the residential area, which we consider to be the most potentially sensitive. And that was sampled during the nighttime hours as well as daytime hours. And they found that the noisiest part of the application was not the actual the processing. Processing was being done inside of the building. The noisiest potential part of the application came from the trucks maneuvering on the site. That was the part that was most picked up.
So
But that noise was picked up, and it was found to meet residential standards day and night, and actually was found to be inaudible up on the hill due to the height, the vegetation, and the berms within the woods.
Are you aware that the berm that you're referring to, the vegetation, was severely impacted by storms this year? After your measurements were taken in January of 2018, the physical measurements, I'm not done. Your physical measurements were taken in January of 18. Subsequent to that, we had 2 or 3 major storms and lost over 24 trees, or on the order of 24 trees off of that berm. So if you're talking about vegetation, the conditions have changed from when those physical measurements were taken. Furthermore, your physical measurements were taken with 1 or 2 trucks moving around the site. Those trucks weren't tipping, those trucks weren't loading, those trucks weren't unloading, and all of the calculations done by the study, the noise study that's been submitted, were hypothetical for any other operation. The wood grinding, which is supposed to run from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 7 nights a week, that was not tested. Now, there's no physical, actual calculation of how much noise that is or what impact it would have on surrounding neighbors. And there were no other conditions which are actually tested. Everything else was a hypothetical measurement based on a study that the noise study that the person put together based on other locations. Is that correct?
No, it isn't correct. Okay, all of the wood grinding noise, the truck tipping, and the truck loading, which you mentioned, are all done within the building.
Were those physically measured during the noise study?
Very difficult to measure in a building that doesn't exist.
That's my
so
point,
So that's
yes.
why you hire a noise expert who's done these kind of measurements before with a building. As far as the outside noise is concerned, the 2 to 3 trucks were the noisiest.
Not 2 to 3, sir, 1 to 2.
1 to 2.
Yes.
The noisiest was determined by him, and he is in his own field, and I found him to be an expert in his field. That's the noisiest noise you're going to hear up on the hill. That's what he sampled for.
Those noise measurements were taken before the significant number of trees fell down, is that right?
I don't know what trees fell down, but in answer to your question, the cliff is still there, the arch tree's still there, the earthen berm is still there. How many of the trees up on the hill fell down to the recent storm, I don't know. However, if there were concern as to what this be, I'm sure in the future another noise study could be taken, and if there's additional berm or trees that have to be planted, that can be dealt with in the future. But it's kind of tough to deal with that in the future when we don't have a facility yet.
Based on the paper calculation, which said that there's 21 decibels of attenuation due to a steel building, is that steel building with all 4 sides and the roof enclosed, or is that with a steel building with 1 or 2 20-foot doors open?
It's enclosed except for the 2 opening doors which face the industrial area and away from the residential area.
My question was in the noise study, when you assume that there's 21 decibels of attenuation, is that for an enclosed building with all 4 sides closed, or with a steel building with doors that are open?
It assumes it for exactly as shown on the plan, with a building with 2 doors facing to the south to the industrial area.
No, I'm asking about the noise study, sir.
That's what I'm talking about, the noise study.
Were the doors open? So for 21 decibels of attenuation of a steel building, is that with a steel building that has the doors closed or open?
First of all, Noise travels in a straight line. It doesn't necessarily go around corners. It follows a line of sight. That's the whole reason why we face the doors to the industrial area and away from the residential area. So any noise that isn't attenuated by the building itself would go out the front doors towards the industrial area and not make a 180-degree turn and go 150 feet up into the residential area.
Are there echoes? Are there echoes from sounds?
Are there echoes? I can't answer that question if there would be echoes.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Just to be clear, just to clarify, the Parsippany Transfer Station that was brought up, part of the Morris County Municipal Utilities Authority, located at 1100 Edwards Road in Parsippany, has a capacity of 1,380 tons per day, which is, well, I'll call it 14 times what is being proposed. Operating hours, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturday, 7:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. So, yeah, it's 14 times the size and about half the hours.
Anyone else?
That's from the Morris County Municipal Utilities Authority website. I was just looking that up. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other council members? Sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Good afternoon. Just state your name for the record, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is George Crimmins. I am an attorney with the law firm Herald Law, and we represent Lakeview Industrial Park Owners Association. And
I'm sorry, George. Can you spell your last name? I wasn't able to hear you.
Sure. It's C-R-I-M-M-I-N-S.
Thank you.
So we represent Lakeview Industrial Park Owners Association and Viola Properties Incorporated. As you're aware, this firm submitted a letter and a protest petition earlier today. I have additional signatures for the protest petition that I would like to submit, if that would be acceptable. Just wanted to state for the record that we had, as of the submission of the protest petition, over 75% of the owners of the affected properties by this proposed ordinance had been protesting the proposal or the adoption of the ordinance. With the additional 6 properties, it is now up to 85.7% of the owners who are protesting. I'm just going to be very brief. I wanted to recognize for the record that the letter and the protest petition have been submitted, and that they should speak for themselves. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Council members? Any questions? You have a question? Go ahead.
How do you define an affected property?
I believe they're identified actually in the ordinance itself. There's a list of lots that are identified.
Those are adjacent properties, but I'm just trying to understand because there's an ordinance that we're looking at, 151699,
yes,
which is about incremental use to an existing location. Are other properties in the site thinking of applying for waste transfer or recycling? Or are you specifically, like when we talk about this particular ordinance, I'm trying to understand how it affects anybody other than the subject property that has the application pending in front of the DEP.
The ordinance suggests, we're talking about 2018-1779, and that is an ordinance that affects lots 2 and 2.23 to 2.49 on block 100, lots 1 and lot 2 of block 145. I'm saying that 85.7% of the area of those lots, the owners of 85.7% of the area of those lots, are protesting the change to the overlay, I'm sorry, not the overlay zone, but the proposed ordinance.
I would like to note for the record that all of the other property owners are still permitted to do those other things permitted in the ordinance. So unless they're doing this type of recycling, they're not affected at all by the ordinance.
That's what I'm trying to get at. I mean, I'm not clear how anyone other than the applicant is affected by tonight's decision.
To the best of my knowledge, no one is.
Thank you.
Well, respectfully, if you look at the ordinance, one of the things that's being removed from it is other accessory uses on the same lot and customarily incidental to the principal use. That is...
I talked with our attorney about that. That's not our reading of it.
That was just part of the 2015 ordinance. And as you know, Mr. Crimmins, any permitted use on the site can have accessory uses that are ordinary to that type of use. So that didn't add anything to the MLUL. So certainly anyone who has a permitted use in any zone in the borough is permitted to have accessory uses that are common to that type of use. As I said, that was just part of the 2015 ordinance. It wasn't in there before then. So we're just really going back to the status quo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, anyone else from the public? Yes, sir. Mr. Neal, how are you?
David Neal, Prospect Street. I think we all ought to look at the big picture, because with having the proposed overlay zone in the quarry, that's what you're hanging your hat on to change the August 2015 ordinance so the transfer station isn't allowed. Now, when you look at the big picture, with the overlay, that's never going to happen. For what it's going to cost right up front, the borough has to run a sewer line in, so you have to cross under, you got to go over stream, under the railroad tracks, blast your way in, and then somebody has to buy out the property owners. I've heard numbers thrown around total between $50 and $60 million just for that. Nobody's thought about sidewalks out of the quarry. Now you just eliminated the use of the Rose Bowl field, because now you're not even going to have parking on one side of the road. What's the sewer, where are we at with the sewer plant capacity? You're not thinking of all this. But what developer in their right mind is going to pay 50 to 60 million up front to clear the site and then build? You talked about trees that came down in the March storm. Yeah, I had some too at home. But how are you going to plant trees in there if you put, dwellings up when you're dealing with solid rock? I mean, this really hasn't been thought about for the long term of Burnetsville, with this overlay zone. I spoke my piece last time about I'm in favor. What they want to do when it's the ninth inning, 2 outs, bases loaded. But you haven't thought at all down the road. What something like that would cost the borough? Are we going to have to redo the sewer plant? But how are you going to have anybody, obviously you want to have them have a walkway out of here. Have you even talked to New Jersey Transit about this? And I know you're caught in the middle of between fair share and transfer station, and the only reason you want to change the August 2015 ordinance basically is to hang your hat that you stop the transfer station. But that still hangs out there, with fair share about 240 units. That's all I want to say, because it all kind of is combined here. Any questions?
Council members? Comments, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Yes, Mr. Baker.
No, good evening. Robert Baker, 61 Alcott Avenue. Just so I think the public should know that that the school board met with the State Department of Transportation 3 years ago, and the bridge at Far Hills is going to be demolished and rebuilt starting next year. At least a 1-year project, could be 2 years project. So that concerns, we've had a lot of issues with how to do the school busing from Bedminster So depending on this project, that could be maybe why the state is recommending trucks go the other way, because they will not be able to go that way. So I think that's a critical factor that you guys have to think about and that the public has to think about, because that bridge takes all the traffic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Comments, council members? Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public wishing to be heard on the matter? Yes, sir, and then you're next.
Good evening, council members. Hendo Gonzalez, 12 Sunset Drive. I guess that one of my biggest concerns about the transfer station, it would be the fact that Governor Murphy really changed, recently changed the fact, the way that you can do renovations in your house. Like, you're no longer required to apply for a permit to tear down your roof or your siding. And many of the old houses, they have a lot of asbestos in the roofing and in the siding. And therefore, you can put those in the, in the dumpsters, and they can be brought into a transfer station, and asbestos can be airborne. So I would be very, very concerned about that, with a transfer station in town.
Comments, council members? Questions, comments? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lead paint as well.
So you had your hand up?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm John Oliveira. I live on Chilton Street. And I've been a resident of Bernardsville for, I think, over 20 years now. So I'm certainly suffered through the time when the quarry was operating with the asphalt plant. And my observations were that we certainly got odors in our street and noise. Concerning the odors, I would call the EPA. I did call them several times, and those filings are on record. I also called the police department. Concerning the noise, I have a humble noise sound meter, and I'll measure them. I don't recall what the decibel levels were, but I suspected they were above the ordinance, although I wasn't able to verify this. I tried by calling the police. So there's a couple of things that strike me a bit odd about this, which is when one thinks of an industrial park, one thinks of something that's in the outskirts of a town, away from the center of a town. That's not the case here. This property is surrounded by hundreds of homes, directly surrounded by hundreds of homes. I have a Google map here, which is all this can access. I'm sure you've seen it. If not, I'm happy to pass this along. You can see all around the quarry, there are houses right next to it on all sides except for about an eighth. So we're not talking about some outskirts area far away from the population. It's right on the population. So while the quarry was operating, there were tons of toxins being emitted, which brings me to my second point. There are unique circumstances about this quarry and the geometry of it. So one sees a plant, there are typically a staggered chimney that's raised well above the plant, right? The idea is that the fumes and the pollutants would be released well above the homes in the hopes that they wouldn't fall on people's properties. That's not the case here. The stack is below street level. So whatever gets released shouldn't be considered that's being released above people's homes or being released below people's homes. Not only on the side where the houses are very proximate, but where I live, which is well above. And because we get the sound there, because we get the smell there, therefore those materials will travel to all of us there. And these are families, we have little children, and we ourselves don't want to get sick. So we have a history of this experience. The physics of what goes on in this quarry is not going to change. Another property of this is that the quarry is round, and it focuses the sound and sends it westward to where we live. So it's not uniform. Gentleman testified earlier that sound travels in a straight line. I have an advanced degree in physics, and I can tell you that's not the case. It travels in all directions, and it bends corners, and it does this because the wavelength is long, as opposed to light, that apparently doesn't turn corners, but it does, very little, but sound, I assure you, does. You can get your expert to tell you this information if you like, but it's true. So, having lived here for 20 years, observing what we're doing here, knowing my fellow citizens, this is not characteristic of the people that I know of Burnesville to do something like this. It's not consistent with the creativity, with the talent, and the aspirations of the people of Burnesville, the people that I know, and I know a lot of them. To turn Burnesville into a garbage town, because that's what we're talking about here, is not consistent with the talent, the creativity, and the aspirations of the people of Burnesville. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Council members, comments or questions? Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
One final comment is that all of us who like to open our windows and doors at night or during the day and hear all the wildlife that we have all around us will be impacted by this. Low frequency sound travels much farther than high frequency sound. So we'll hear a rumble. For sure we'll hear a rumble. I heard it before. Why wouldn't I hear it now? I want to remind people what the decibel scale. Someone said that the building absorbs 21 decibels of sound. That may be true. On the decibel scale, please keep in mind that 3 decibels represents twice the power intensity.
All right, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to conclude. Your 5 minutes is up.
Okay.
So someone else can speak, but thank you very much for your comments. Sir, you want to speak? Good evening.
My name is Christopher Otto. I live at 110 Post Cunard. I serve a lot of councils. I have a real estate, probably the largest consulting company in the tri-state area. I also am a professor of real estate, graduate, undergraduate at Monmouth. And I would just caution the council against, while it's very hard to support that kind of truck traffic, I would caution the council against making decisions against or in favor of property owners that knowingly live next to existing conditions. The statutes and the case law is very clear about having property owners complain about, for example, I live behind a train tracks and now I don't like the train noise. If you live next to an industrial park and you live next there, it's very hard to unzone or rezone an area when they already moved next to that area. There's a lot of case law and lawsuits on that, and from the town's perspective, as a resident of this town, while it's hard to support the truck traffic if that's going to be that amount, I don't want to see the town get into a very long lawsuit that's going to be costly, like happens in a lot of other towns. So just please, if the town's not going to approve this, I would probably try to shield the other property owners within this group so that they're not precluded from any future uses. I would have it be very specific if you could, because anything that's broad could open the town to lawsuits. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Council members, comments? All right, anyone else from the public? Anyone else? Seeing none, council members, any further comments? Oh, Jeff.
Jeff Hammond, Flintlock Court. I actually hadn't planned on speaking because I've spoken on this matter at previous council meetings, but I do think it's important to bring out that much has been alluded to the applications and the environmental impact statement that have already been submitted, but what has not been mentioned tonight but has been mentioned in previous meetings is the number of factual errors and gaps in that statement, so in the environmental impact statement. So I'm not going to go over that again, but I think I want to remind the council of that because we've heard a lot of verbal promises and stipulations, and they're just not in the writing that was submitted, and I think that's what you have to go on. And the last thing I want to say is that what hasn't been mentioned yet, I don't think, is our master plan. And the borough master plan calls for reducing traffic coming in and out of the quarry, not increasing it. So this proposal actually runs counter to our master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond.
What was the last comment?
Master plan.
Yeah, what was it? Hey, Jeff, I couldn't hear you. What was the last comment you made, please? What was consistent with the master plan?
Increasing traffic in and out of that quarry area.
It's counter to. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wishing to be heard? No, yes, sir.
Peter Welsh from Gladstone, New Jersey. The only thing I have to say is I don't know how they would figure that there'd be less traffic with 431 units in there versus the trucks. I said that at the last meeting you had, and I just don't get that. If you're worried about the traffic, that's not going to help.
I think we're conflating two issues though, because the overlay plan, that was part of ordinances that were considered previously. What we're talking about is an ordinance 1779, which specifically addresses terms of the 1699, which is about expanded industrial use in the quarry, expanded new approved uses. It's not talking about traffic. It's not addressing the fair share housing agreement.
I'm just addressing what he just stated, that's all. Okay. I'm not trying to put something else on the table, it's just that.
Thank you, sir. Council members, any other comments? Anyone else from the public wishing to be heard? Anyone else? All right, since no one else, I'll close the public hearing on ordinance 1879, an ordinance concerning use permitted industrial in the industrial district and amending chapter 12 of the Borough Code, Land Development Code entitled Zoning. I'll entertain a motion to pass on final reading and adopt as published. Have a motion from council.
Does anybody want further discussion? Amongst ourselves, I mean?
Would
you like to discuss now?
I'm comfortable voting on it unless anybody else wants to talk about it.
The only thing I want to say, it's hard to express how many people that live in this town are not in favor of this. Because there were so many that said their main concerns were the livability and the community that we know and love. And no one wants that feeling to change. I also have to point out that when I read the application, there were things that didn't seem correct to me, which we expressed to the DEP too. So it talked about home values, and some of those numbers didn't seem very current. It talked about the fact that there's no vegetation in that area, no residents within the half a mile, which we talked about. And the one that really stands out to me or stood out to me was the fact that it said there were no parks affected by this. So many residents pointed out that the Rose Bowl is right there. And many of our girls play softball there because that's the main field for our girls softball. So I would have rather this been presented in a different way. In other words, when Tom pointed out the guidelines of, you know, if you were going to propose something like this, how to make it so that the community understands what's happening instead of putting forth, you know, 100+ page application that contains information that people just have never seen before. So as a resident, just a normal resident, it's not uncommon to be taken aback. And I think Mr. Ferranti said that. A lot of towns go through this. A lot of towns have this come up, and I'm pretty sure it's an issue every time. So I think our priority, even though we're not against business ownership, small businesses, I mean, we support you, but we also have to think about residents and the quality of life here, so. It's a tough decision.
I'd second that. I think nobody here, I think ill-intentioned or trying to pass something off. It was just, it's regrettable they got this far, and some of these things may have been surmountable 3 years ago, but they weren't addressed. So I mean, recycling is a valuable service to all of us. We'll throw stuff away, but I think we're at a point. And right now, I think as it's constructed, I think it's put too much of a burden on our town's infrastructure. Or just on our traffic.
Well, I think what you both are talking about and what Christine brought up originally is another way of saying the master plan is basically supposed to promote the things that Christine is talking about. And having this particular facility is not consistent with the master plan. And that is the recommendation of our planning board as well. We got that recommendation from them recently.
Yes, that's correct. We do have a memo from the planning board saying they reviewed the ordinance and found it was not inconsistent with the master plan, which is the language from the MLUL, the double negative.
And that's in the package. Anyone else from the council? I'll entertain a motion to pass.
I move to
final
pass
reading.
18-1799.
Okay, moved by Mr. O'Day, second by Mr. Schmidt. Roll call, please.
Mr. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. O'Day?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ms. Amaro?
Yes.
So the ordinance does pass because there were 4 affirmative votes.
Yes.
That's despite the fact that a protest was filed. You still met the threshold for 2/3 of the entire membership of the council.
All right, thank you for everyone who has spoken on the matter. We'll move on to item number 5 now, presentations or affordable housing. Anthony, can you tell us the order of presentations and just give the public a general overview of what's going on? I have to recuse myself from this part of the meeting. And Mr. Sullivan can rejoin us. Chris will take over.
Should we move down to the, I think they're going to have a presentation behind us.
Oh, it's
Maybe we should move out into the audience.
It'd be easier for us to see too.
Yeah, we can't hear up here, so we may as well.
Yeah.
The order of the developers is going to go Conifer first, CIS second, RPM third, and there'll be a 15-minute presentation and then 5 minutes for question and answer. So 20 minutes total.
Conifer first.
enough. As long, yeah, I see it up on the screen, good enough. Yeah.
That's, I think that's probably.
Sorry. So forward and backward. Great. Thank you. Is there a way to focus slightly?
We can't see the results of focusing from up there.
Got it. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Jim, can we try adjusting focus a little, please? Okay. No. Reverse. Stop.
It's as good as it got.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can we do a test? Does that sound good?
Are we back on? There we go. Okay. Once again, we're in the order. We have our share housing presentation this evening. You have a 20-minute presentation. 15 minutes of that will be for your actual presentation. 5 minutes will be given for Q&A after. First up is Conifer.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Charles Lewis. I'm Senior Vice President of Conifer Realty. With me is George Hibbs from the architectural and planning firm of Clark, Kate & Hinz, and Mike Ford from Van Cleef Engineering. We thought pretty much what we'd do is go through the questions you guys had raised, and to do that, I'll start off with George.
Thank you, Charlie. The way in which we've structured the presentation is based on your questions. We'll try to be as succinct as possible with regard to responses to those specific questions. So you had a question about the design philosophy. What design philosophy would our team recommend for Bernardsville? And I think that it's a philosophy that boils down to sort of 2 points. One is appropriate design. What would be the appropriate design for your particular town? And when we say appropriate, that also transitions into what we see as traditional residential design. So these are two elements that really speak to the buildings that are most familiar to you and throughout the town. You have actually directly adjacent from us here is the house on Olcott Avenue with the historic district, the public library, the station where we had dinner, Rudolph's. So I think each of these elements throughout town speaks to quite a few different things. One is the materiality of town. It's traditional materials. These buildings are they're stone, they are brick masonry. These are traditional forms made up of traditional gables. And in particular, that's something that we found throughout town is the use of the front porch, not only in residential design, but also in commercial design, and how that relates. In particular, with regard to our team, we're the only team as part of the three that's actually designed family housing, affordable housing for your town previously. Here we have the Pine Ridge townhouses, which is directly adjacent to one of your potential family sites. We also wanted to show, in terms of site design, as appropriate design, what's prototypical, what's sort of typical of a conifer development. And this is Springfield School in Burlington Township, and you see again the lush landscape, very particular to a level of detail with regard to the site that we think is, and this is again just a very standard approach that conifer takes. In terms of specific architectural design aspects that we believe are most relevant and appropriate to the town. So again, in terms of those aspects, it boils down to site design and building design. With regard to the overall site design, each of the sites is very unique that you've selected for us to take a look at. Family sites 1 through 4 and senior site, which we call number 5. Each of these sites is essentially equidistant from the train station within a walkable downtown development, and is each in and of its way, even though they are very similar, they're also very different and require a different approach to a successful architectural and site design equation. In particular, with each of the sites, we'd now like to break them down into what we call small and medium scale design. We see the first site on Childs Road, which we're calling here option number 1, is really a small scale design. So this is less than 10 units, and what we have here is the transition between the commercial of 202 and the residential to the north on Childs Road, and how a family housing project may be situated in such a transitional space. Here we have parking at the front and the residential towards the rear. A second option would be to align the front facades, that this wants to be much more of a traditional neighborhood approach where you're aligning the residential pieces and moving the parking to the rear. So there are pros and cons to that, and here we've aligned the commercial or the entryway to the parking aligned with Valero, the commercial, to the right on the screen. As we go through each of these images, you're also going to see, with regard to the differentiation of parking, the potential of a slight delta in the numbers. Medium scale multifamily. Here now when we look at your Maple Street development, where we have parking in the front, the residential towards the rear, and this is again very near the Kiwanis Park and South Side. It's also transitional between the quarry and some of the residential development, and this is directly adjacent to Pine Ridge townhouses. And again, here we see, once you shift parking to the rear, and think about that front facade closer to Pine Street, it's a very different elevation one would get if you pushed it all the way to the rear of the site. With regard to Minebrook Road, now this is a very different scenario where previously you had transitional neighborhoods and much more single-family residential or transitional spaces. Minebrook is a much more heavily traveled thoroughfare, and this is something where we see the potential for, again, parking, screening of landscape at the front. However, the slope is it's very difficult here. So there's a strong slope from top of page to bottom of page, high to low. So there would be a need for a retaining wall. And herein we have parking, residential, retaining wall from low to high. The opposite approach would be moving those residential units a little closer to the street, aligning those front facades with existing residential. And again, looking at items such as retaining walls and buffering and landscape plantings. This is directly adjacent to the municipal building or across the street with regard to Minebrook Road. Front parking, rear parking. And in terms of medium scale design, here's our senior family residential piece and the way in which that would be approached and the transitional pieces between residential and commercial. These are some of the relationships in terms of streetscape, walkable neighborhoods that we have performed on in other locations, the issues of materiality, color, traditional forms here in Pennsauken, the idea of the porch, and the way in which we can utilize something like that here in Burnsville on many of the sites, the tradition of stone, to incorporate stone elements, horizontal clapboard siding, true gables, traditional shapes, walkable neighborhoods. You see that constant theme here, traditional brick masonry, front porches, prominent doors, and again, this is the potential of a prominent brick masonry structure. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Charles Lewis.
I'm going to spend a lot of time with the next slide. Ask how incorporate your comments. We'd be willing to meet with you as often as you deem adequate. I think initially, at least, we would present you if we're selected with conceptual site plan, conceptual architectural plans, and elevations. Have at least one meeting prior to proceeding to engineering plans, and then we can have as many meetings thereafter as you desire. Talked about examples of incorporating design elements, and I thought that this was really a question about how do we incorporate input from other people and other entities. And I want to talk a little bit about the Green Heron Point. It's a job in Middle Township in Cape May County. We had to work in that case with a architectural committee made up primarily of residents, and this was an unusual site in that it was rectangular, very long and narrow and perpendicular to the street. And one of the comments we got from the committee was, gee, as you drive by the street, all you see is the size of the buildings, which was true. And they asked us to dress that up. So we moved the front entrances to the side of the buildings, put porches there, actually put a gable on the side elevation, a little bit of trim, because that's what they do in Cape May, and added some shutters. This is another job we did in Cape May where very top, you can see there's the dark brown building. That's a neighbor during preliminary site plan. They complained of the fact that their backyard, which is really gorgeously landscaped, opened up to a large building. On our part, they're worried about noise. We have porches in the back of our units, and they're worried that people will be looking at the backyard. So to accommodate them in final site plan approval, we swapped a smaller building and moved the retention basin. I don't know if you can see to the left of the bottom of the T, that's actually a large deck that the neighbors had. So we arranged it so they overlook the retention pond, and they only have to worry about smaller buildings opposed to larger buildings. So it's an accommodation made for a neighbor. This is a job we did in Woolwich in Gloucester County. We basically had a flag lot. The county was concerned about the number of road openings, and in response to their request, we granted an access to the roadway is ours to the properties on either side of the roadway, so that when those properties were developed, they could use our entrance instead of cutting a new entrance onto the county road. And in the far right, you can see there's a yellow road. That's a municipally owned pump station. There was a road that ran out to the main road that provided access to that. In order to eliminate that roadway, we actually made an internal driveway in our site the municipality could use to access the pump station. That's just a photo of the completed project. Medford Senior Residences, even though this was new construction, it's in an historic district, so we had to meet with the Historic Commission and incorporate their comments into our design. So this is new construction, but it matched very well, very complementary to what was in the historic district. And this is an actual historic project. This is the Duffy School Apartments in Florence, New Jersey. Have the dichotomy where you have to preserve what was in the original building and then try to make it useful somehow. So we converted the old gymnasium into a community room for our residents. We're able to put some offices in the rear. So that turned out really well. Examples of projects where we encountered delays. And this sounds a little arrogant, but we typically don't have delays because we try to avoid them through due diligence. And that is a matter of, this is an example of a project in Deptford.
5 minutes.
Thank you. This was actually a landfill, and what we did in order to discover what's there, we did a geophysical report, which is basically an x-ray of the ground. Had our contractor and our engineers out there for a day and just dug holes, had a real good idea what was in the ground, very good estimate of quantities. We were able to basically work that into our schedule, and actually probably 2/3 of the things we took out of the ground we were able to put back in. This is Green Heron. This is another job I believe we pointed out earlier. Very heavy rains when we first started our site work, so in order to remedy that, we brought in dry sand to mix with the wet sand and also put in the stone, and we're able to speed the drying process by doing that. This is Gateway Village at Summerdale. One of the things we're proud of, we've come in and taken over developments that other developers could not complete. This was one where the competitor actually had tax credits and all the funding in place and said it was impossible to do. We walked away from the job. We came in and within 90 days we're under construction. We have done 24 developments in New Jersey since I started in 2008, all completed on time. And we have investors who we basically give a completion schedule to, and we beat our occupancy projections in 16 out of the 24 developments. So thank you, and we'll take questions at this point.
questions?
You mentioned Pine Ridge, that's one of our developments here in town. Conifer built that, is that right?
No, Clark Caton Hints were the designers.
I'm sorry, say that again?
My firm, Clark Caton Hints Architects, we were the designers for Pine Ridge.
Oh, I see. So the same architecture firm that
Same
designs
architecture firm.
Pine Ridge would be designing these?
Correct. As long as you were happy with Pine Ridge.
If you're not, I'll fire you and bring somebody else in.
There's other architects in here.
Do you recall Pine Ridge when that was built? I don't.
I believe that was the early 90s.
1990s?
I had no gray hair. That was much.
And did I read, I've read a lot of different presentations. I think one of them said something like we can avoid delays by using designs that are consistent with things you've done in the past. Is that right?
Yes, most of the developments, the buildings you see are similar design. In order to count a unit towards your amount lower obligation, the first floor has to be fully accessible, which means it has to be a flat. So all of our family developments have a single, basically flat unit on the first floor, and then we either have another flat or a townhouse on top of that. So it's basically some combination of flats over flats or townhouses over flats. So basically, we perfected that design. And you'll see that just about everybody uses a similar design.
And by using that similar design, are you constrained to what the exterior looks like, or do you still
No,
have
no, in
flexibility?
fact, that's the beauty of it. We can, just about all those buildings were the same basic box, but you can get sort of some interest in the front by bringing maybe every other unit out, so that, or put a recess in. You can use different materials. You can use brick, you can use siding, stone, combinations of the two. We typically have multiple colors within the development, so it's not a cookie cutter approach where, like, if you have 9 buildings, they all look identical.
Anybody else?
Can you describe your success securing your LIHTC credits?
Yes, I've actually been working with tax credits since the program began in 1986, first as an attorney for the city of Philadelphia and then as a developer. I would say our hit rate is probably about 93%. I count, and within the last 10 years, we've been no worse than number 3, and on several occasions been number 1 in terms of total tax credit awards during that time.
What happens to a project when you, so 93% hit rate, so I assume that means 7%,
Right.
not hit rate. What happens in those 7% of cases? What happens to the project?
We typically keep putting them in. Sometimes you have some degree of flexibility in doing something that maybe increases your score. We had a development in Camden where we had, it was 2 separate projects. We put them in 5 times before we ultimately got funded. And sometimes money falls from heaven. With Superstorm Sandy, the federal government made a lot of money available to the state to do development. And we had a couple deals, hadn't been able to get tax credits, but they were in counties which were seriously affected by Sandy, so we got lucky in the one sense that we were able to use Superstorm Sandy money to get those deals done. And just the other thing, one of the reasons, and it's probably true to most of the major developers in the industry, is our hit rate's so good is because the state has a very unbiased, cut and fast, hard and fast rules on scoring. Either you're brownfield or you're not, you've got a pilot agreement or you don't, so that you pretty much know going in how you're going to score. We didn't bother chasing anything that won't get a perfect score. In Bernardsville, family development, and actually senior development as well, would get a perfect score.
Council members, satisfied? Or we more questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anthony, do you have the next?
You have the next one handout?
There's no handout for the next one.
I didn't get a handout yet from them, and then did you have,
give you folks a minute to set up. Let us know when you're ready. Are you good to go? Okay.
Good evening.
Next, we have community investment strategies, and we're ready when
We're
you're
ready to roll. Chris Folio, president and owner of Community Investment Strategies. I know we're on tight timeline, so we're going to get going. So our firm really believes in a philosophy of pride of place. Hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate what that means. We're going to try to fill in the blanks. Obviously you've received our handout. What we're trying to get across this evening is that although we are making a presentation on a rental property, we're hoping that you'll see in the work that we've done is that we've approached this so that our architecture and our approach will hopefully show you that we have flexibility in design so that people will have pride in the way that they live that will meet the pride that you see when you drive down any street of this community. I had the pleasure of serving as chair of the State Planning Commission about 20 years ago, and I got to know your community very intimately and the way it works and the position that it plays in this county, and kind of fell in love with it back then. And so it would be a real wonderful opportunity to come and actually work within this community. And I understand the traffic patterns and the way people use the train station and how critical your downtown is. And I think, you know, the affordable housing is only a piece of the lifestyle and the vibrancy of this community, and to have people be able to walk and participate in the vibrancy of this community would be amazing. We believe that pride of place also includes having a front door. So you will see, and Tom Barton, our architect, hopefully will stress that that front door really needs to be, you know, the same as every other front door that you see. And that's very, very critical in CIS, and you'll see in some of the other pictures that we're showing, and you see this on the right, is a meaningful address. It's not 101A and 101B, but it's 6 Pine Street or 10 Front Street, so that a child, when they go to school and they write down the address as to where they live, it is a real address. It's a place. It's pride. So that's what we really believe in. We will conform with all the Energy Star and the efficiencies that come along with that resilient material and quality that promotes lifestyle and health and the wellness components that we all want to see as we promote technology and the advancement of building materials. We have a nonprofit partner in Enterprise and have already solidified our investment partner for the tax credits. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Tom and hopefully drive home our commitment in terms of our quality and architectural design.
Good evening. Again, my name is Tom Barton. I'm CEO of TCB3 Consultancy, an architecture and planning firm in suburban Philadelphia. We've been working with CIS for 20 plus years, something like 22. Okay, 22 years. So we have a long history of working together as a team. And we, when we were asked to take a look at this project, we first took a look at the community and looked at the specific sites. There's unique characteristics here. Each of the sites is very different, one from another, has been already mentioned, whether it's vertical challenges with grades, site location, visibility, a variety of criteria, accessibility, and so on. And so we looked at a product that we felt, a building type that we felt would be most appropriate. And this design was developed specifically for your project. And what it is a series of stacked flats, flat units, each with individual direct entries on grade. So every unit, whether it's a first floor unit, which would all be handicapped accessible and adaptable, or a second floor unit, has a front door on the street. Everybody has an address. And what the advantage of that is that it clearly defines a principle is used a lot in planning and architecture called defensible space. It's clear who belongs where. It's my residence, you're in my home, or you're in a public space. And there's no questions, which is one of the reasons for years ago failures in a lot of affordable housing projects. There was no clear delineation of those spaces, and we've made a conscious effort to avoid that. But also, we've been really conscious of the issues and challenges of these varied sites, and the idea that we want to fit within your community. Your zoning ordinance is very clear that is your desire that these units be indistinguishable from the neighborhood. They just fit in. They're not the affordable housing units. They're just more housing units within your community. And so this product type that we've taken is a two-story product. We feel it's very important with the scale of what's around each of these sites to stay within 2 stories. And we can design them in a variety of scales. This happens to be a colonial revival style, which is probably the most prevalent style that you see in your community, which is very eclectic architecturally. But we can also do Victorian, more classic styles, even Italianate or shingle style architecture. All of those styles appear in this community and would be very appropriate. And so each site, we envision each site varying architecturally, one from another, yet the basic product, the basic house, the 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units that we're providing all will be relatively similar, but we're going to also adapt them for the sites. As I mentioned, there are grade situations that create challenges, and the beauty of this product type is that it varies. It can provide a variety of building forms that work on each site, and also we can provide for the grade changes within these buildings. We can slide the units vertically. I'm going to have Steve Bickle, who did the planning work, just talk very briefly about each of the sites. We did a site plan for each site, showing how we might approach it. There are a couple key things I just want to mention, and one is that we use the architecture throughout to minimize the impact of the parking. So all the parking on all our schemes is pulled to the rear to create a pedestrian front to the sites rather than a parking lot. So here's Steve.
Thanks, Tom. As Tom stated, as you see here on Minebrook Road, we did situate the parking behind the building to help minimize and hide the parking from the street front. We also, with the massing of these buildings, we looked at aerial, your neighborhoods, and figured out the spacing of a very typical home. So we tried to respect the spacing and massing of the community. Here, on the next site, the 111 Minebrook Road, we went out to the site and saw that the grade is a little challenged on this site. It's about a story change from the road up to the top of the screen. So here, our same product type is able to be reconfigured a little bit, but we're using our building as the retaining wall, so we don't have a retaining wall holding back the earth. And again, our parking is behind. One thing that I do want to point out, which I know that Chris and Tom both stressed, that we have direct entry units, and they're on all sides of our building. This creates the pride of place. We're not just focused on a front, the street front, we're actually elevating all our facades to be the same level. So that nice image that you saw that Tom talked about with the wraparound porches, we have them on all facades. And Childs Road was a little bit of a challenge getting in here and hiding the parking for this building, but we feel the pump house, which is in the lower left, helps hide the parking from the street front, but allows us to connect back out to the street at Childs Road. And then Finley. Finley is our 30-unit building. Parking again in the back, a nice drop-off that comes in, and short massing along the front, trying to respect the scale of the neighborhood. And with that, I'm going to put it back to Chris.
And so to finish up our presentation, as Tom mentioned, we've done 22 projects with Barton That represents $350 million of construction, and we have delivered 100% of those on time and on budget. And we think that's important because it's in those projects and on site where we would hit those, look, every site has its issues, but it's being able to work with a partner and be able to still deliver on time and understanding that you can work those projects out while you're during construction and having a team member that you can work very closely with. And so after 22 years, it's like an old married couple. We get it done and we still like each other at the end of the day. So we've been pretty happy. Do you want to go back to that last slide? Because I think that shows some of the projects. In the upper right-hand corner is a project we did as an infill project in Cape May in a historic district. That actually was for a special needs population. That actually is a aging out autism for individuals. And the right-hand side is an infill urban project. And that project is a picture of a project that's over 10 years old. So I thought it was interesting that we would actually put up a project and show you what it looks like at 10 years old. And on the left is a historic project that I did in Bordentown, New Jersey, and that's an assisted living facility. It's a new addition to a historic monastery. And that project, that picture was taken when it was about 5 years old. So we've worked in communities that have historic buildings, as well as urban infills, as well as historic districts with very interesting populations to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions?
Just a general question. Can you talk more about the parking in the back? Like, why is that the preferred way? I know you mentioned, like, some of the reasons, but just elaborate on that a little bit.
We really drove a lot through the community, and so we felt if we were going to make sure that these properties were not looking different than the rest of the community, that we just didn't see a whole lot of parking in the front. And so at the end of the day, that became our benchmark for design. And so that's why we were very committed to making sure that each of these sites were in no way stuck out as something different. So that's why we chose that. Okay.
I just add that, remember, each of these buildings includes multiple units. So the parking requirements under RSIS require a fair bit of parking. As you noticed, each of those site plans had a fair number of parking spaces. Most of the residential in your community, if not all, has a very low parking ratio in the front. And a lot of times it's located in the front because it's so few cars, however, it's not really that noticeable. But by pulling these larger parking lots that are required into the rear, we can meet the parking requirements and yet minimize the visual impact. And then the secondary reason is that we want to make these these are all located close in the borough, and we wanted each of these sites to be as pedestrian friendly and hopefully accessible to the rest of the community. We'd like to encourage people to walk. I mean, it's just a planning best practice, and we'd like to see that as part of this design.
Questions?
So you talked a lot about the individual front doors and individual entrances as one of your key design philosophies. How do you address then common spaces like fitness rooms, computer rooms, club rooms, or other interior spaces which are meant to be community spaces?
They are located within buildings within each of these sites. Not every site has a community facility. Certainly the seniors building would have the most significant common areas associated with that building. And in fact, that building's a little different, and we didn't really get into the details of that because that is, as a senior building, multi-stories, it's elevator served, so all the units are handicapped accessible. There are common hallways in that building, and in a senior building, you want to provide a controlled access point to the site. So that, I apologize, I didn't get into the specifics of that design, but our desire for the family units is absolutely direct entry on each unit having a front door. For the senior units, the approach is different, and that is a common entry, good security, and visual and control. The common areas are off that same lobby area. And then with the other buildings, we would take a space within each building or every few buildings and put those common areas in them.
So are there common areas in sites 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I'd have to look at each. Okay, there are not. There is going to be, I believe, an on-site management office in one of the sites.
Am I misremembering that a computer room was supposed to be with all these, or is that not right?
I'm not sure I remember correctly.
We do not have a common amenities element in each of the buildings, no.
Is that part of your scoring with the, I'm not familiar with.
We'd have other amenities you can have. There's a variety of scoring that you can have. It's not just one.
So you could get scoring for
we'll
that
get other
or for
scoring.
something else?
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
How many projects in New Jersey?
We have 33.
And then what's your success with funding with LIHTC?
We're also in the 93%. I mean, you can't stay in business in New Jersey unless you're consistently getting funded. So we would rank with our competitors here.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, efficiency. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Edward Martoglio. I'm the president and one of the 3 founders of RPM, and I'm delighted to be with you this evening. Last time I wasn't here, but Elizabeth Kulinich was here from RPM, and I'm also happy to let you know that she's had a 10-pound baby boy just a few weeks ago, so it's quite an accomplishment. So I think the council is in the enviable position. You have, I've worked in this field for 3 decades now, and I think you're in the enviable position of having 3 very high-quality firms to choose from. I don't think you could go wrong with any of them. I think, of course, I'm a little biased towards RPM. I think our approach is the best. But I think all 3 of us are proven craftsmen, work long in this industry, and from the quality of the presentations, I'm sure you'll be able to gather that. So the way we're going to work tonight, we're attentive to your time schedule. Joaquin Buzes from the Inglés architectural firm will answer the first 3 questions, and I'll answer the last 2. We've had the privilege of working with the Inglés architectural firm for 25 plus years. They don't do all of our work, but they do the great majority of it, and they've grown with us as we have over the years in our approach to our work. So Joaquin.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us again and explaining our design concept from the last time that we presented it a few months ago. So this will go into a little bit more of how we go about designing our projects and creating the ideas that create what I believe are great buildings in communities, especially when RPM is building them, as they have for 20 plus years. This image on the top right, we typically start with an image that tries to capture the essence of what we're trying to create in the look or the idea for the town that we're designing in. And we thought that this design or this image captured that essence for Bernardsville, in that
It showed that beautiful stone on the bottom as a base, tying the building down to the ground. Simple, elegant detailing of the facade with the trim, whether it be board and batten or siding, which as long as we've been designing with RPM, we've been doing fiber cement siding, no vinyl siding. Many windows bring in natural light into the units. You'll see many buildings with very punched openings. Creates a sign of an affordable housing project. And a standing seam metal roof that we've recently done on a senior building in Newton, New Jersey, up in Sussex County. So on the bottom image, you can see on Minebrook Road, this is typical and the same language that we carry through the sites, as you saw in the other presentation that showed all the sites and how we approach them. Again, we put the buildings in the front with beautiful landscaping to kind of carry that language across many of the sites. RPM works with a landscape architect on all their projects, and putting the parking in the back of all the sites. We don't want to show off the parking. There's nothing to show off. It's functional and it gets the residents in the building. We have individual entrances along the front of the building with one main entrance that brings you into a lobby, and then elevator. Every building is an elevator building. That means it's ADA accessible or adaptable, and it creates a space for interaction for the residents. RPM has a live-in super in all their sites. Mr. Martoglia will speak to that a little further. But if you've researched a little bit of their portfolio and all their projects, all the sites or the projects are really well kept, maintained, and they age very well because of that maintenance. So I traveled around your town, looked at all buildings and tried to capture a language or a pattern. I have to say it's a very dangerous town to drive around in as an architect. We have very beautiful homes, but I made it through. And so I captured these images of a farmhouse look on the right and a colonial on the left. Again, capturing that material that I saw in that first image that we used as a inspiration. Stone veneer, lap siding, architectural shingles, but standing seam on the farmhouse type, gable roof lines, and extensive landscaping throughout. Again, more images of the buildings and homes that I saw, and picking up on that language. On the top right-hand corner is a new building that just started, or that was just completed in your town, with some modern elements. And this is the design for that we're proposing, which it carries on that language, trying to catch that pattern, add a little bit of the standing seam metal roof, the shed roof, the gable, the board and batten, stone, but using it in an elegant and very minimalist kind of pattern, with no need for shutters and architectural detailing that eventually comes off or falls down, or a shutter falls down and nobody puts it back. The buildings are designed to age well. Again, you see the landscaping all in the front. This is a larger, a Minebrook Road, the longer building. And you can see those individual entrances with the shed roofs along the front. Again, we don't put any entrances on the side or on the back of the buildings. There's neighboring sites, there's neighboring neighbors, and we don't want somebody's entrance to be on somebody's rear yard or side yard. Everything is to the front. This is a project we recently was awarded for 50 affordable units in North Caldwell, New Jersey, in Essex County. Very proud to build in North Caldwell. And so going to your question of how we incorporate the ideas and input from the borough, initial design on the left, and North Caldwell wanted a little bit more gables and individual porch entrances to highlight the entrances, more stonework, and bays with trim. And so we proposed it, they loved it, and we'll be starting construction in a couple of months. This is a design we're doing currently for Rockaway in Sussex County. And the initial design on the left, we were going for a modern craftsman style look, lodgy look. The town really didn't like it, thought it was a little bit too modern. They wanted a little bit more colonial look to kind of match what was in the town. And so we offered that design, and we'll be going to the zoning board in a month or two with a new design. And Mr. Ortoglia will talk to these. Oh yes, we do have, would you just show them? We have a material board showing the type of materials, the fiber cement, as I spoke, the standing seam metal roof, a wood accent, and windows. I failed to say that the buildings will be LEED certified, leadership in energy and environmental design. I think the new building that was just finished in your town is LEED certified. And then the stone for the base of the assets.
So 2 points before I answer the next few questions. So one of the things I think you can take from Joaquin's presentation is, though we love good design, and the architects have a lot of opinions about Joaquin's firm in particular, they have a lot of young architects, so they have a lot of innovative designs. But at the end of the day, we want something that the town's comfortable with, and that everyone, that's going to be the home for the residents that live there. And the other thing is, LEED is a really important program. We have designed and completed about 30 LEED buildings, all at the LEED Platinum level.
5 minutes.
All at the LEED Platinum level. And like our colleagues, the energy efficiency in our buildings is increasing every year. Right now we're doing what's called a net zero building. It's down in Gloucester County in the town of Westville. Net zero means that at the end of the day, that because of the level of energy efficiency and the solar panels, the energy cost for all of the seniors in that 65-unit building will be zero. So all paid for by PV because of the photovoltaic, because the energy efficiency of the building is so high. Now on to the 3 questions. I'll go relatively quickly. This is down in Keensburg. This site is under, which one is this, Keen? Oh, got it. Yeah. This is under construction now. We hope to open in November. One of the things that we implemented here is you'll see this actually looks right out over the Raritan Bay, and this is a town that got hit very badly by Superstorm Sandy. And one of the goals was to bring some affordable housing, but also they wanted market housing. So, you can't quite see from that picture, but the top floor units are duplex units, market rate units. So it's got a combination of both market housing and affordable, which is really what the town was after. This is in Newton, a project we completed just last spring, 65 units of senior housing. And one of the things we're proud of here is a community room that we worked pretty closely with the town on. The town uses it half the time to conduct community activities for their seniors. That's just the inside of some of the units in Newton. And then examples of projects that encountered delays. Well, this is my 32nd year of working at RPM. And for the most part, we've had tremendous good fortune. Sometimes the weather does a number on us, and We also had a problem in 2008, as you may recall, with the financial collapse. It almost ruined the entire tax credit industry. Thank goodness for the federal government. They came up with a program that provided alternate funding. But for the most part, we've managed, not most part, we have 100% completed every project that we have started. We have never had any restructuring or problem with any of our lenders. And in fact, we have been able to take over a number of failed projects over the years. This is the job in the city of Orange, right next to the train station. And the delay there was a crummy winter, and then since we built a garage underneath the building, we encountered some difficult soil. But it's completed and works beautifully. And then at the end of the day, that's our story up there. I think at the bottom it says 5 years, 13 projects. I think that's probably accurate. We own and operate every tax credit project we've completed, which is in excess of 60. And I know, Councilman, you'll probably ask us a question about our success. So we every year since 1986, we've received awards, sometimes as many as 5 awards in any given year. What happens is that is the scoring, as I don't know if it was Chris or Charlie mentioned, the scoring is key. You folks are in the enviable position of you have a town that has a perfect score, which means that whoever you select, as long as the town and the developer work cooperative, you'll have a project. That's almost a guarantee. There is a new qualified allocation plan being created as we speak.
1 minute, sir.
And but right now it looks like the scoring is going to stay largely intact, so that Burnsville will be a perfect scoring town. So I want to finish ahead of schedule, so I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Council members, questions?
I wanted to clarify with Joaquin. We talked a bit about front entrances, and then I wasn't quite clear. Is there an individual entrance for every one, or it's front entrance only? There's multiple entrances, but you go into a common space, and then you can go into a hallway or elevators. Is that how it's set up?
Correct, yeah, and it depends by site, but we would have individual entrance units along the front of the building, and then one main entrance, highlighted as the main entrance, where you would come into a lobby and then go into an elevator and go into your units, or back units.
So if parking's in the back, is there an entrance for those people who park?
Correct, yeah, so there would be a back entrance along the middle spine that gets you into that lobby area.
And so if you have the one main entrance in the front of the relatively long building, the other entrances go into individual apartments, or they're just like faux entrances or for appearance? Or?
No, so they would go into, sorry, this is not going fast enough. There would be individual entrances. Well, see where that shed dormer is? Or that entrance. So that would be entrance into a unit, and then another unit, and then the middle entrance would be for the main.
Okay, so
only on the ground floor.
Okay,
units.
so some people would have their own entrance, and then more than that, a larger proportion would be through the main entrance.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
The only other thing I would clarify is that it's possible to do individual entrances for every single unit, but there's a trade-off in the number of units you can get. The more individual entrances you have, the lower the number of units you'll have.
So an address is 147 blah, blah, blah road, apartment ABC.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct. But I mean, you could do townhouses that you could even make them fee simple. We've done that in some places. The towns really wanted that, so that every townhouse has its own address. But then the density level is far lower. If you have a lot of land, we'd be happy to build lots of townhouses.
How many projects in New Jersey have you done?
Over 60. We only work, we're based in Montclair, but we only work in New Jersey.
I should ask the others too, but I apologize. The second floor residents, do they have any access to open like balconies or sliders with the gate, just to? Was that typical of a second? I mean, it's nice to open a nice day to open the door and have get some outdoor area in. Is that?
Will there be patios? Is that your question, or?
Would there be? Is that part of the design?
So we have some French balconies.
Yeah.
We don't design many balconies because we know that people tend to use it as a closet sometimes.
Gotcha.
And so we try to use like a French balcony that comes right up flush, and you could open up the French door, you can get some
Okay, I was wondering, just so the quality of life is nice to open and get the fresh air, but I get your point. When I lived in an apartment, one of my bikes, everything was out there, so.
Right. We love to create outside passive gardens where people can plant and just recreational space, but you need enough land to do it. You know, it really depends on the overall layout, but I would say the great majority of our sites have outside some kind of passive recreation space outside.
Anybody else? And then what's your percentage of LIHTC funding projects?
It's very high. I don't know the percentage offhand. On a perfect, I can tell you we've never not got funding on a perfect scoring job. I mean, sometimes we take on projects that are you know, that have lower scorings because of some other reason, but on a perfect scoring job, it's 100%.
If we look at the North Caldwell project specifically, you show the initial design with what looks like cement board siding, and then the new design, which has extensive use of masonry and brick.
Yeah.
Yes.
In that scenario, is somebody absorbing additional costs? What's happening?
No, we made it work. Actually, Aaron, who's over here, the young architect, the initial design, that was his second design. The first design was kind of looked like it came out of Boulder, Colorado, or Portland, Oregon, had these V-shaped roofs and was very modern and contextual, I think, or organic, that's what it was referred to as.
And we're using real stone, actually.
But your question is, where did the extra money come from? You know, in the scheme of hardy plank is not that much cheaper than brick. It's just not. That's hardy. It's not vinyl. We don't do any vinyl siding.
And you use contractors over and over. He's been working with contractors for many, many years that they work with us and they give us great prices.
Okay, so from a design perspective, if our planning board or if the council was interested in using a higher proportion of masonry than average, you're not saying that that would preclude us from doing something?
We would do all masonry if you wanted it. I actually think I like the mix personally, but if you wanted all masonry, we would do it.
I'm just trying to clarify where the money comes from.
Okay, we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we will bring our normal meeting back into session.
Anything or move forward?
I'm ready.
All right, at this point in the meeting, the mayor and council welcome comments from any member of the public to help facilitate an orderly meeting and permit the opportunity for anyone who wishes to be heard. Speakers will limit their comments to 5 minutes. If reading from a prepared statement, please provide a copy and email a copy to the clerk's office after making your comments so it may be properly reflected in the minutes. Anybody from the public wishing to? Ms. Sullivan? Yes.
Thank you. Janine Sullivan, 25 Stevens Street. In my haste at the last meeting in August, I requested from the council approval to put the Team Campbell Foundation signs around town as we have in the past, but I did not specifically say that some of the signs would be placed in the technical right-of-way of a road. So I would like to come back again to clarify further so that the zoning officer knows that it's been approved by you to allow for the signs to be in the right-of-way where they do not impact a corner, a crosswalk, or any visibility for our driver, such as along Claremont Road where it's the park on the right side, such as on Sini on the corner where it's just landscaped grass, things like that where it's not in any main road or any main corner. Also to remain in the Alcott Square Center, because that too is technically in the right of way. So for whatever reason, we need to come back and ask for that specific approval.
Any problem?
Just, my only question is, have you had any complaints or concerns that, or you're just
We have not directly. We received after I appeared last meeting, the Team Campbell Foundation received an email from the zoning office stating that we had not applied for the signs. I clarified that we did not apply for the signs because that particular application is for a different type of sign, that instead, for the past 4 years, we've come before the council to ask for the broader approval of a month instead of a 2-week period. And obviously, it was a very long meeting the last time as well, and I rushed through and was not specific enough.
I have no problem.
Everybody's okay with council?
I would
Any
just say,
objections?
as long as you move anyone that somebody specifically complains about, that would be the only, if a resident specifically complains about something.
About a location?
Yeah, about any
Yeah,
one
I moved
specific-
them all already, so when she complained, I moved them all back.
Oh.
And in preparation of coming here, so that I can then move them forward again, but in the meantime, I did not want to
I'm
have
sorry,
any
did you say
takeaway.
a resident complained about the location?
No, just Renee.
Oh,
No
okay,
one's-
got it.
So just the zoning officer complained, but
Right.
to be compliant, I moved them all back, and I would like permission now to put some of them more forward. They're actually in bushes in some cases right now.
All right, everybody's okay with it? All right, Anthony, you'll notify the zoning officer tomorrow? About the signs, okay. Thank you, Ms. Holden.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else from the public? Yes, ma'am.
Marion D. Simone, 3 Franklin Court, Bernardsville. Just wanted to compliment the council on the presentations tonight. They were great. And to add, what I loved about the third presentation was their talk about the materials and the long-term view of what we find with either apartments or especially condominiums where there's a maintenance fee. Over time, if the right materials aren't used to start with, pretty soon affordable housing becomes not affordable anymore because they can't support the environment. So if we can give extra consideration to those that can prove that both interior and exterior are being built with with a view or lens of its longevity and looking good for the long term, I get my vote. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else from the public? I see, and then I'll close the open session and move on to items of business. All right, ordinance. We're going to continue a public hearing from August 13th on ordinance 18-1777, an ordinance establishing procedural rules for borough advisory committees and supplementing and amending Chapter 2 of the Borough Code entitled Administration. Public hearing is open. If anybody from the public or council would like to be heard on this.
My opinion, Mayor, is that this ordinance should be shelved. I think the housing committee is being selectively targeted, and it's my understanding that currently members of employees of the town are attending other meetings except the housing committee. So I think either the ordinance needs to be shelved or maybe disband, which I'm not in favor of, disband the housing committee. Or third, wait till after the election and table it till after the election.
Council members? Yes.
Moving until after the election, dude?
What's that? Well, when people go campaigning and knock on doors and people say, hey, you know what you guys do, landlords that treat us worse than the garbage dump. I'll give you an example. I think it's 15 Prospect. We, the town, went out on July 2nd and did the annual inspection. perfect property. On July 23rd, there's a police report complaint, and they called a number of people out of the house in handcuffs. The following day, housing goes in, and there's locks on doors, plywood up, mattresses all over the place. So I'm emphasizing the level of depravity of the landlords, placing not only the tenants, but our first responders at risk.
Why were they brought up?
There's some disturbance, I'm not sure.
Okay, not related to that specifically, but.
Yeah, just, my point is that once the police went in due to a completely unrelated matter, they found that the landlord had, after the inspection, 21 days after the inspection, it was back to normal mayhem in the house.
Do we have any inspections that aren't scheduled? You know, knock on the door on a random day?
I don't know.
It's the way to inspect, the way I see it. You tell a restaurant 30 days prior, I'll be there.
Oh, yes.
There's going to be lots of cleaning going on.
Same with our landlords. They know it's coming.
I understand what you're saying.
So I think this ordinance, though, is really not talking about what our inspection schedule is or how we go about enforcement. This is about how we conduct our committees, and do the committees have an authority that exceeds the authority that's given to the council members themselves. In addition, I think that we were given advice by our personnel council.
Labor Council.
Pardon me?
Labor Council.
Labor Council, that an ordinance like this was appropriate for our borough. So given the advice of council, I think it's important for us to consider and move on this ordinance.
Anyone else from council? All right. Seeing no further comments, any comments from the public before I close the public hearing? Right up. Who's speaking? I can't even. Okay.
Jerry Negri, 36 Anbar Place. I don't know what the ordinance you're speaking about. I'd like to know what it is you're...
Okay, Jack, you want to give a briefing?
Sure. This ordinance was to apply to advisory committees, not to statutory commissions and boards like the Board of Adjustment or the Planning Board or the Library Board of Trustees or any environmental commission. And it created several new procedures. One is that the mayor would appoint the chair, or the council would appoint the chair of those various committees. There'd be annual training, not annual training, training required every 3 years of chairs and vice chairs of the various committees, both as to parliamentary procedure and the scope of the responsibilities of that committee. It prohibits direct contact between the committees and individual employees and officials of the town. It does several other things along this line. As Mr. O'Day said, it was crafted upon the recommendation of Labor Council.
Is this for rental incomes, rental properties, or for...
No, it applies to all advisory committees.
It's the committees itself, all advisory committees.
It doesn't affect
address
enforcement.
rental properties. It just addresses the employees and committees. Yeah, that was an example that was used. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mayor. That was a good wave because I have to scan the room, so you have the hand up there.
Mary Jane Canoes, 24 Autumn Hill Drive. I'm a little concerned about this ordinance. I think, yes, you need guidelines for volunteers, but I think, I'm sure you've experienced, it's hard to get volunteers these days, and to keep them and to get them interested. And I think it might be a little too restrictive. I know I've heard some of the chair people, already saying training. Now I have to go for training. So maybe there's a compromise that it could be a little softer on what you require and still have guidelines in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the steps we took from that comment that came up last meeting was that we adjusted the training schedule to not be an annual training schedule, but be a training schedule for anybody who is new to the position of chair or vice chair, is it?
Yes,
And,
correct.
so first of all, it's a one-time training for anybody who's new into the position of chair or vice chair. The training would be videotaped and available to other members of the committee. And I think it's very important to note that we are not restricting people from providing their opinion. We are clarifying the procedure, which is that if you are on a committee, you are an advisory committee to the Borough Council. Your role is to advise the Borough Council on what actions should and shouldn't be taken. The committee itself is not empowered, nor is any individual council member empowered to give direction to an employee of the borough. The committees should make their strong recommendations about how we should implement policy and procedure, inspection schedules, and things like that to the council. And it's the council's job to then enforce those ordinances. And this is clarifying the process by which the committees operate. It's not eliminating anybody's role or our appreciation for them volunteering on a committee. It just clarifies how those committees function within the overall management of the borough.
There's some inherent fundamental problems with it, and we are essentially a parliamentary board, and we're part-time. And when you have an employee from the town who is at one of these meetings, it certainly facilitates. And for instance, the Shade Tree Committee, the decision-making ability is frontline. So I'm not saying the committee has the authority to tell the employee what to do, but it's certainly a recommendation. And that's why I just think this ordinance is a little overbearing.
To try and address it, again, first of all, the ordinance was at the suggestion of Labor Council that we should do the ordinance. Second, we also tried to attempt to address that concern, which was brought up previously as well, and that concern was addressed through the process of saying that on a case-by-case basis, there would be authority granted to communicate directly with employees on a project basis or about a specific question. But the primary approach would be that the council, the committee, the chair of the committee would contact via email the borough administrator with a list of what the concerns are, questions that would then be addressed and responded to in writing. And if that is insufficient, there are two options. You can bring the issue to the council, and the council can consider whether or not the issue was appropriately and thoroughly addressed, the committee's concerns. And secondarily, if it's appropriate in the view of the administrator, authority can be given on project basis or case-by-case basis to contact a particular employee if that's going to help expedite an answer to a question.
I think Labor Council was concerned about liability resulting from non-officials supervising and monitoring employees when that really should be done by the borough administrator.
Yep.
Well, that's really exactly how we got to this.
Yes, we did. Because of potential
ordinance.
liabilities.
Yes. All right, anyone else? Public, council? All right. Close the public hearing, entertain a motion to pass on final reading and adopt as published. I have a motion.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Mara.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. O'Day. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mara?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
No.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. O'Day?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Okay, I'll open public hearing on ordinance 1778, an ordinance adding 10 units to the Borough Senior Citizen Affordable Housing Site on North Finley Avenue and amending various sections of the Borough Land Use Ordinance. Public hearing, anybody from the public and or council? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Entertain a motion to pass on final reading and adopt as published. I have a motion.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Mara.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. O'Day. Roll call, please.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. O'Day?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mara?
Yes.
I'll entertain a motion to move that ordinance 1780, an ordinance increasing towing fees and amending Chapter 3 of the Borough Code entitled Police Regulations, be introduced by title, passed on first reading, published according to law, and that a public hearing be scheduled for a meeting beginning 7 p.m. Monday, September 24th, 2018. Do I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Schmidt. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Donahue. All in favor?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right, Anthony, the ayes have it. All right, I'll entertain a motion to move that ordinance 1781, an ordinance appropriating $15,000 from the Borough Open Space Trust Fund to fund a survey and a wetlands delineation for Moraine Crest be introduced by title, passed on first reading, published according to law, and that a public hearing be scheduled for a meeting beginning 7 p.m. Monday, September 24, 2018. We have a motion?
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Donahue, second.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. O'Day. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, the ayes have it. All right, we have resolutions 18191 to 18204. Anyone wishing to pull any for further discussion?
I'd like to pull 18198.
Okay, 198. Okay, anyone else?
Good.
Okay, seeing none, Mr. O'Day, your question or
So
comment?
I have a comment. I just wanted to thank and congratulate Liam Rye and Laura Aquino for their volunteerism for our fire department.
Outstanding.
Good.
Concur. Also, in the spirit of the fire department, this past weekend, we went up to Ithaca, Utica, and our fire department ranked #1 in fundraising.
Very good.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, good job.
And they performed very well in the stair climb.
All right. Did you do the stair climb?
No way.
Okay, anyone else for the resolutions? 18191 to 18204. All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to move. All right, Mr. Schmidt? Second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Sullivan. Roll call, please.
Ms. Zamara?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. O'Day?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Okay, item 7C, trunk or treat. Olivia? I thought that was you who walked in earlier, but I can't see with the lights, so it's hard to see in the back.
Okay, it's past my bedtime. I don't know about anybody else, but how's this? Are we good? Yeah. Tim's fixing the microphone, I guess. I am Olivia Manning, 13 Orchard Street. I'm here representing Burnsville Special Events. We are officially a 501c4 nonprofit organization. We have a tax ID. We are in the process of getting insurance. We are up and running. And I have a little brief that I've actually sent to Anthony already. I don't know if he sent it to you guys. If he didn't, I have copies here for you. Just a little bit about what we are doing currently, what our structure is, insurance, working with the police department, fire, and just having everybody on board before we start doing all the actual organization of the rest of the planning. So tonight I wanted to ask the council, mayor, about our event coming up on October 27th, which is a Halloween trunk or treat and miniature fall fest. I have been speaking with Alexandria and Tammy over at our library about doing programming there as well. So they will be working on doing a lot of fun things inside the library and working with us to do the actual trunk or treat portion outside in the parking lot. Now, as you all know, the parking lot is borough property, so obviously I want to make sure that we can use that space. The library is perfectly fine with using whatever we need to, but I am asking the council and mayor for permission to be able to use that space for our event. So far, we have a lot of interest. I've spoken to a few of the businesses in the area, and they're very excited of getting this back. It's been missing for a couple of years, so I'm really excited to get this going. So if you'll have us, I would love to be able to get this going on the 27th of October.
What is it doing down with the pool?
Doesn't the
No,
library
this was
board-
trunk or treat. You could go around town and get candy.
Doesn't the library board make that determination?
Alexandria actually spoke with the library board, and they came back to her and said that the council and mayor would need to make that final approval. So they were okay with it, so I need to make
Yeah, I would think
Yeah, I
the
don't-
library board has the authority to do it.
Sure, and it's our property. I don't
Yeah,
have
it's
a
our
problem with
property.
it, council members.
I don't have a problem with it.
Any questions, council?
All the appropriate insurance will be in place, just to be sure?
Yep, we will be carrying a policy of our own that will be consistent throughout the year, and then we'll have the availability of additional event insurance for the specific day, depending on the actual event itself as well.
Sure, and you just check with the clerk and he'll let you know with the
Yep,
insurance,
I
how it
think
has
we
to
have-
be, you know.
we've communicated a little bit about the specifics on what needs to be in place, and making sure I have at least the minimums good to go, so I think we're set there too.
This is a great idea to regenerate this. I mean, it's been done before, but it hasn't been done recently, so thanks for the effort.
A great initiative. Yeah, you really
Absolutely,
have-
yeah, there's
you
a
really
lot more
have
in
a lot of
store.
work.
I have a list of additional events. I've actually communicated with Bonnie Sellers. As you all know, she's working hard with Paul Sedlak and crew on all of the revitalization efforts. She has forwarded me graciously the event list that the company she's working with is considering to do in that space. So hopefully I can alleviate some of those things by taking it on with our group here.
That's a lot of work, and I thank you for
It is.
stepping
I
up.
love doing it. So just so everyone knows, I have about 15 years of event planning and marketing experience, so this is my thing. So I'm excited to do it.
Thanks for volunteering.
All right, so
Okay.
council members, everybody's okay? All good?
Yes.
Yes, John, you okay? All right,
Awesome.
very good,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, 7D, Board of Adjustments appointments. We had individuals in our package. So, Christine, any comments? I know I saw an email.
My opinion is, I think Board of Adjustments, planning boards, these positions are, in theory, probably more impactful to the town than we are. And I think that we should interview anybody who wants to be on one of these committees, because, I mean, I live on Stevens Street. If you drive by Mine Mountain, the old St. Bernard's Church, we have a massive construction project going on. So I think these positions are crucial. So I think that we should speak to them as a body and Q&A.
I would have to agree, because I had trouble like voting yea or nay on someone, at least haven't had a chance to get a feel for, and, just in correspondence, or just conversation.
I was also going to say, let's move this to another date.
Okay.
So to give us time to interview applicants, because I echo 100% what Mike just said.
So we're going to invite the candidates for Board of Adjustment to come to the next council meeting?
Yes.
And then we'll talk to them about their interests and backgrounds.
Yes.
One of the things that's missing from the item on the agenda is that it wasn't just Board of Adjustments, but there's
Shade Tree?
the Shade Tree appointment of Tom Wood. So Tom and I spoke about this, and I'm not sure if any of you have or not, but he has been volunteering pretty much as if he were a member of the Shade Tree Committee, so it's mainly like a formality to just kind of appoint him.
I don't have a problem with Shade Tree.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a committee and not
Yeah,
a board.
right.
So I think we could consider it separately, and I would propose that we do that because I think, as Christine's already pointed
Yeah,
out.
it's a mayoral appointment, so.
Oh, it's a mayoral appointment?
I don't know, the trees he gave me, he didn't survive. It was him and Joe Latino, so you could blame Joe. But yes, mayoral appointment. Tom, you're appointed. Tom with the Shade Tree. Everybody's okay with me?
Congratulations and
Very
thank you.
good. Congratulations.
I've seen him once before. He looks
You've still got the best attendance at council meetings.
has. I
You
see
have
every
everybody here
meeting.
beat. All right, 7E, Animal Cruelty Task Force. Chief here? Chief, you have anything on the
Public safety hasn't met to discuss that yet, so we'll hold that off.
Okay, very good. We'll hold that off to a future meeting. All right, Finance Committee report carried from August 13th.
Yes, so we have a Finance Committee report for the council. So I'm going to go ahead and read the information that's in the update. Some of it may be sort of elementary for our council members, especially those who have been on the council for more than a year, but for the general public and also for our new council members, if there's anything here that's might be helpful in clarifying stuff. So starting from the beginning, the first paragraph, or the first page rather, talks to property tax bills which were issued in 2018, which is why this was
originally on the August 13th agenda. Those tax bills are covering Q2 and 3. Sorry, that was a misprint. It's Q3 and 4 of this 2018, as well as Q1 and 2 of 2019. And the tax rates, for clarification, especially for the general public, are affected and impacted by several things. That would include the assessed values of any specific property, as well as the overall assessment of the properties in the borough of Bernardsville. School taxes impact the tax assessment that you'll pay each year. County taxes, the municipal taxes, county open space tax, which is a separate item, municipal open space tax, which is a separate item, and the library tax. The increase in the amount to be raised for the municipal portion this year is 2.79%, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we came to that amount. On page 4 of the presentation, we just have an illustration here. It's a little easier to understand how the tax rate, which is for 2018 is 1.991, that's actually calculated by the total taxes, which are the items that I just discussed, of which the municipal taxes is what the council here has the most influence over. We have very little, if any, influence in the other categories. Library tax is the one where we have some influence. That's then divided by, so the total amount of tax is then divided by the total assessed values of the properties, and that's how the tax rate or the millage is calculated for our annual assessments. So to illustrate this, then on the page 5, I did a bar graph which shows the portion that from the municipal budget, the portion that comes from the other two large areas are the county tax and the school tax being the largest portion of it. On page 6, the denominator for our millage rate comes from the total borough of Bernardsville property values. And you can see that while the overall trend is up over time, the more recent trend is relatively flat. It was actually down in measurable form from 2008 to 2010, but since then, and if we blow that up on the next slide, slide 7, the trend was down in the 2 years, 2009, 2010, and it's been up and down a small amount in the other years. You could argue that it's relatively flat, but that's based on how you want to read the data.
It's also in our package here.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. It's online, it's in our package.
It was in the package, but I wanted to have it for you. It looks like the copies got made one-sided and...
They are one-sided, yeah.
Okay, so if we need to go back to anything, we can...
No, you can continue.
Okay, so the takeaway is that there's many factors that impact the tax rate, which is also called the millage, that's used to calculate the tax bill. The council is responsible for one of the components that affects the tax rate in your overall taxes, and that amount is the amount to be raised by taxes to support the municipal budget. And in our case, we actually give a little bit extra to help support the library as well. So the amount to be raised by taxes in 2018 is $10.5 million. 9.6 of that is for your municipality and 0.9 is for the library. So the table on the following graph shows how this compares to prior years. So first we have the table that shows the amounts, and this is where the 2.79% comes from. So this is the amount of increase in the taxes, the amount to be raised by taxes due to changes in the municipal budget. That's what we approve, and we approve the municipal budget each year. Then I show that graphically on page 10, how that compares to the last 10 years, and then furthermore, I had a graph comparing it over the last 38 years as well, and that's just for our reference so that we can see how it looks compared to what the historical changes have been. That's the Finance Committee report. If there's any questions, we can address them or bring them up in a future council meeting.
Anyone? All right, seeing no questions. Anything else for finance? Tom?
That's it for the Finance Committee. We have some personnel issues to discuss in our
executive session. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
All right, 7G correspondence. We have a notice from JCP&L about their basic generation service charges. It's part of our package, and a public hearing will be held on September 25th, 2018 at 1:30 p.m. at the Morris County Administration Records Building on 10 Court Street, Morristown, New Jersey. And there'll be a further hearing by the board on September 28th in Trenton. That'll be a board hearing. So the public hearing will be again 1:30 p.m. September 25th, Morris County Administration Building, 10 Court Street. And it's just an adjustment of charges. And it's not going down, so. Anyone else before we go into closed session?
There was one thing that was emailed and put on Dropbox that came in on Friday. It was from our insurance from Meeker Sharkey for our group accident policy for volunteers. They just wanted us to consent to renewal. There's no changes in terms, no conditions, no changes in conditions or the premium. They just needed to have us consent to renewing that. I asked Jack, and he thought that the council needed to consent to that. It's due this week, so there wasn't that much time, but it came in on Friday. That's why it wasn't on the agenda, but that's why it was due
Okay, I
this
did
week,
see
so
that in the
it's
package. Anybody have a problem with that renewing?
No, I reviewed, I think it's like $1,100 or $1,800.
yeah, there's no change from the past. It's a normal thing we've had for, they said, for about 20 years we've had it before, so it's been ongoing.
Any other comments from council or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, the ayes have it. All right, no further business. Anyone, council? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to move into closed session to discuss personnel matters. What else do we have, Jack? Contractual?
We've got anticipated litigation, attorney-client privilege, personnel matters. We've got a whole.
And possibly
We make 'em out
contractual
next.
obligations.
We make them at next.
All right, so we make them out and take action after this. Thank you, everyone. Entertain a motion to move. Moved by Mr. Schmidt, second by Mr. Sullivan. All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Sure. Take some water. Here.
Hey.